Chapter 46-31. More than 1,000 years ago, the 5 peak god kings had joined forces to kill Kenshin. After Kenshin's death, the 5 peak god kings had comprehended the eternal heavenly book and had broken through to the god emperor realm. Now, Ji Tianqing had killed the Azura god emperor and had their revenge. A life for a life. With the death of the Azura god emperor, the enmity between the two was naturally cancelled out. After Ji Tianqing finished speaking, the 2 sea beasts and the 5th palace master came back to their senses. Originally, the 2 sea beasts wanted to continue attacking the 5th palace master and kill him before they were willing to stop. Then, they would meet up with the other 4 god emperor realm sea beasts. However, Ji Tianqing was still present. The 2 sea beasts were unsure of the situation between Ji Tianqing and the 5th palace master. Although Ji Tianqing had killed the 6th palace master of Shangqing Temple, and logically speaking, he should be an enemy of Shangqing Temple. However, the sea beasts had always understood that the desolate race was full of scheming and deceit. It was not something they could easily see through. Therefore, before Ji Tianqing made his move and made his next move clear, they would not easily take action. The 5th palace master was also full of vigilance and wariness. He stared at the 2 sea beasts and Ji Tianqing. The 3 god emperor experts in front of him were all enemies of Shangqing Temple. They had the reason and motive to kill him. However, he knew very well that the 2 sea beasts would definitely not collude with Ji Tianqing. Therefore, the 2 sides might not join forces to deal with him. Since the 5th palace master and the 2 sea beasts did not take action, Ji Tianqing kept the burial of heaven's sword and flew away. He came to Shangqing Temple's territory and entered the Chaos Sea. After many twists and turns, it was all to seek revenge on the Azura god emperor. Now that he had taken his revenge and achieved his goal, he naturally had to leave. As for Shangqing Temple, he had no enmity with them, so why should he provoke them? Swoosh! Ji Tianqing transformed into a stream of light and flew across the night sky. Soon, he crossed tens of thousands of miles of sea area and disappeared in the chaos mist. The 2 sea beasts and the 5th palace master watched him disappear, and they all secretly let out a sigh of relief. Without the mysterious desolate race god emperor, the situation became a lot clearer. However, their reactions were different. The 2 sea beasts started to surround the 5th palace master from the left and right. They locked onto the 5th palace master's aura, revealing their killing intent. As for the 5th hall master, he took out 2 transmission jade slips and informed the 1st hall master and the 3rd hall master of what had happened earlier. Not only did he have to inform the hall masters that the Azura god emperor had been killed by a desolate race god emperor. He even described Ji Tianqing's appearance, strength, realm, and temperament to the temple masters. No matter what, he had been ordered to rescue the Azura god emperor. Since he had failed to complete the mission, he had to give the 1st palace master an explanation. Even if the Azura god emperor had been killed, he could not be muddle-headed. There had to be an explanation. Just as the 5th hall master sent out the transmission jade slips, the 2 sea beasts had already surrounded him. They roared angrily as they used their divine powers to launch a siege attack. Swish! 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 A dazzling divine light, a sword beam and spear shadow that could split the heavens and earth came crashing down on the 5th hall master. The 5th hall master did not hesitate at all. He immediately used his teleportation technique and turned to escape. He would rather use the divine sword and divine pot to protect himself, minimizing the damage he received as much as possible, than to get entangled with the 2 sea beasts. Although he had seen Ji Tianqing fly away with his own eyes, Ji Tianqing's origins were too mysterious, and his whereabouts were too strange. He did not dare to let his guard down. If Ji Tianqing returned while he was fighting with the 2 sea beasts and lurked beside him, giving him a fatal blow at the critical moment, then, wouldn't he follow in the footsteps of the Azura god emperor and die on the spot? It was because of this reason that the fifth Hall Master decided to escape and not fight with the two sea beasts. Boom! 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 The sky was filled with saber light, sword shadows, and the light of divine spells. They violently blasted into the Chaos Sea, creating a deafening explosion and stirring up huge waves. The attacks of the two sea beasts missed, and the fifth Hall Master was only slightly affected. The divine sword and divine pot neutralized the impact, so he was not seriously injured. He took the opportunity to escape tens of thousands of miles away, widening the distance between him and the two sea beasts. He rode the divine sword and ran all the way to meet up with the first Hall Master. Somewhere in the sea 2 million miles away from the fifth Hall Master. The first Hall Master had been fighting and retreating, facing the siege of the four sea beasts with difficulty. Although he had the strength of an upper-level God Emperor, he was confident that he could kill any God Emperor-level sea beast in a one-on-one battle. However, when the four sea beasts worked together, they forced him to retreat repeatedly. He was beaten to the point where he could not fight back, and his injuries kept worsening. The first Hall Master had been suppressing his anger for a long time. He was so angry that he almost went crazy, but he did not have a chance to fight back. He looked more and more miserable. His hair was disheveled, his clothes were ragged, and his body was covered in blood. He looked very sloppy. Finally, when the third and fourth Hall Masters arrived, he was finally free. The four sea beasts were all in the middle level of God Emperor. Among them, Lan Long and Yubingxin were injured and could not use their full strength. The third and fourth Hall Masters were slightly stronger than the four sea beasts. When they worked together with the first Hall Master, they could naturally turn the tables and gain the upper hand. The situation was reversed. Previously, the four sea beasts were chasing after the first Hall Master. Now, it was the three Hall Masters who worked together to defeat the four sea beasts. They could only defend themselves. The two sides fought for 100 breaths of time, exchanging hundreds of blows. When the first Hall Master waved his scepter and sent Lan Long and Yubingxin flying, blood spurting out of their orifices, into the Chaos Sea, the first Hall Master finally vented his anger. He wanted to continue the chase and kill Lan Long and Yubingxin. He even wanted to kill the other two sea beasts to prevent any future trouble. However, at this moment, the four sea beasts unanimously decided to retreat and stop fighting. With their geographical advantage, they knew the Chaos Sea like the back of their hands. With the cover of the Chaos Fog, they quickly disappeared without a trace. The three Hall Masters chased them for hundreds of thousands of miles, but they could not catch up to them. Instead, they were left further and further behind. From the looks of it, it was hopeless to chase after the four sea beasts. At this moment, the first Hall Master and third Hall Master received a transmission jade slip from the fifth Hall Master. When they finished reading the contents of the jade slip, they were shocked. The sixth Hall Master was killed. He is a God Emperor. How could he have fallen so easily? He was killed by a desolate race God Emperor. How is that possible? Which temple's Hall Master dares to attack our Shangqing temple? The first Hall Master and third Hall Master found it unbelievable. They searched through their memories, trying to guess which desolate race God Emperor would attack and kill the Shura God Emperor. When the fourth Hall Master saw that the two of them were stunned, he asked with a voice transmission, "What happened? Are we still going to continue chasing after the four sea beasts?" The first Hall Master decisively put away the transmission jade slip and ordered with a gloomy expression, "There is no need to chase after the four sea beasts. Immediately rescue the fifth Hall Master and kill that desolate race God Emperor. I want to see who that fellow is. He dares to be so audacious as to assassinate my Hall Master." Chapter 46-32. The third and fourth Palatial Lords did not hesitate to carry out the Grand Palatial Lord's orders. The Grand Palatial Lord took out his warship and the three of them immediately entered it. In order to allow the warship to reach its fastest speed, the Grand Palatial Lord personally controlled the warship and continuously teleported in the night sky. Swish! Swish! The warship transformed into a stream of light and constantly disappeared and flashed in the night sky, going further and further away. On the way to the south, the Grand Palatial Lord controlled the array in the control room. The third and fourth Palatial Lords stood behind him and the three of them were still discussing the matter. Could that unknown desolate race god emperor have colluded with the aquatic beasts? According to the fifth Palatial Lord, before he met the Shura god emperor, he did not discover the existence of the desolate race god emperor. When he was about to rescue the Shura god emperor, the desolate race god emperor suddenly appeared and killed the Shura god emperor in one move. When the fifth Palatial Lord arrived, the Shura god emperor's divine body had already been destroyed and he was only left with a divine persona. Although the Shura god emperor is not very strong, he is still a god emperor. How could he be seriously injured to the point of having his divine body destroyed in just 2 hours? I am certain that the desolate race god emperor and the two aquatic beasts have joined forces. Whether the desolate race god emperor colluded with the aquatic beasts is something that cannot be determined for the time being. This is a taboo matter. Once it is exposed, the desolate race god emperor will no longer have a foothold on the continent. By the way, how is the fifth Palatial Lord's current situation? Is he in any danger? When the Grand Palatial Lord arrived, the fourth Palatial Lord hurriedly took out a transmission jade slip and sent a message to the fifth Palatial Lord to inquire about the situation. After a while, the fifth Palatial Lord sent a message back, indicating that he was escaping and had yet to escape the pursuit of the two aquatic beasts. However, the two aquatic beasts were not very strong and they had expended too much of their god power, so they were temporarily unable to do anything to him. According to the current situation, he would be able to shake off the two aquatic beasts in another hour. After learning that the three Hall Lords were piloting a battleship towards the south to intercept and kill the mysterious desolate race god emperor, the fifth Hall Lord expressed his support. The three Hall Lords only needed to search for the desolate race god emperor and did not need to send anyone to rescue him. Since the fifth Hall Master's life was not in danger, the three Hall Masters were no longer worried about him. They focused on their journey to kill the desolate race's god emperor. The Grand Palatial Lord pondered for a moment before ordering the third Palatial Lord. Just now, in the message sent by the fifth Palatial Lord, there was a projection of the desolate race's god emperor's appearance. It also introduced that fellow's situation. The fifth Palace Lord said that he remembered the desolate race's god emperor. He was one of the 70 surviving guards, but it was unknown when he left the team. The third Palace Master nodded and said with a complicated expression, logically speaking, the fifth Palace Master must have recognized the wrong person. How could there be a god emperor among the disciples of our palace? But the fifth Palace Master would not lie to us, and he said it so confidently. If this matter is true, it means that the desolate race's god emperor has hidden himself very well. He deliberately sneaked into our palace and took the opportunity to assassinate the sixth Palace Master. There must be a bigger conspiracy behind this, and it is extremely dangerous for our Shangqin Palace. The fourth Palatial Lord also nodded slightly to express his agreement. He said in a deep voice, regardless, we have to find that fellow and figure out the truth of the matter. If not, that fellow might very well use other schemes to topple the Shangqin Palace. The three Hall Lords realized the seriousness of the matter. The Grand Palatial Lord ordered, the two of you, go and search the survivors. Do any of them know the desolate race's god emperor and know his origins? Yes. The third Palatial Lord and the fourth Palatial Lord cupped their hands and left the cockpit. Following that, the two of them entered the battleship's hall and gathered the 600 elite godly monarchs that had survived. When everyone was gathered in the hall, the third Palatial Lord waved his hand and produced a divine light that floated in midair. In the blazing white divine light, a blurry figure appeared. It was a tall and burly desolate race youth. It was Ji Tianqing's previous appearance. The fourth Palatial Lord ordered everyone to carefully observe the figure. He wanted to see if anyone knew this person and his origins. The 600 elite godly monarchs stared intently at the light screen, observing the blurry figure. Suddenly, a peak godly monarch stood up from the crowd. Reporting to the two palatial lords, "I recognize this person." When this voice sounded, everyone's gaze landed on him. The two palatial lords raised their eyebrows and looked over. They saw a pale-faced desolate race man in armor with a somewhat weak aura. He stood up with a complicated expression. This person was none other than the Deputy Hall Lord of the Three Mountain Hall. Although the Shangqin Palace had suffered heavy casualties in the previous battle, with more than 1,000 of the 2,000 elite godly monarchs dying, leaving only about 600 people alive. The Guardian battleship that he was on was the first to be destroyed by the Sea Beast army. More than 20 elite godly monarchs from the Three Mountain Hall had all perished in the Chaos Sea. However, he was the Deputy Hall Lord and was also a peak godly monarch. Although he was heavily injured and his combat strength had decreased greatly, he had managed to survive the battle. At this moment, the two palatial lords solemnly gathered everyone and took out an image. The person in the image was Su Juechen of the Three Mountain Hall. This made the Deputy Hall Lord somewhat nervous and excited. He thought to himself, why did the two palatial lords gather everyone and ask about Su Juechen's identity? Could it be that Su Juechen finally found a suitable opportunity to display his strength and make a great contribution? Humph, that despicable guy, he should have done so long ago. I just did not expect him to be so patient. He only displayed his true strength at this juncture and left a deep impression on the two palatial lords. Although the Shangqin Palace had suffered heavy losses in this operation, the Deputy Hall Lord did not feel the pinch. As long as Su Juechen performed well enough to attract the attention of the palatial lords and bring glory to the Three Mountain Hall, that would be enough. Speak, who is he? The fourth palatial lord frowned and stared at the Deputy Hall Lord with a dignified expression. The Deputy Hall Lord was so happy that he did not notice the changes in the expressions of the two palatial lords. He said directly, reporting to the two palatial lords, "I am the Deputy Hall Lord of the Three Mountain Hall. This person is a citizen of the Three Mountain Hall. His name is Su Juechen. He only made a name for himself during the elite selection. I led him to the Shangqin mystic realm." Not only did the Deputy Hall Lord introduce Su Juechen's background, but he also wanted to bring him along. Naturally, he wanted to show off his achievements. However, he did not expect that before he could finish his words, the fourth palace master waved his hand and shot out a ray of green light that sucked him in front of him. "You will come with us. The rest of you, leave." With that, the two palatial lords took the Deputy Hall Lord of the Three Mountain Halls and left. The screen of light in the air gradually dissipated. Over 600 elite god kings looked at each other in dismay. After the two palatial lords left, the quiet hall immediately became noisy. Everyone was whispering to each other, wondering what had happened. Chapter 46-33. Logically speaking, being able to stand out from more than 600 god kings and catch the attention of the hall masters was an extremely good thing. However, the vice hall master of the Three Mountain Hall was being carried away by the two hall masters. From the two hall masters' expressions and auras, they seemed to be very angry. The vice hall master of the Three Mountain Hall seemed to be in trouble, and it was a very serious one at that. Thinking of this, the crowd no longer envied him. Instead, they sympathized with him. The matter seemed to have arisen because of Su Juechen of the Three Mountain Hall. Then, they would have to see how serious the matter was. Many elite god kings gathered in the hall, discussing as they waited. From their point of view, if they waited a little longer and saw whether the vice hall master of the Three Mountain Hall could return safely, they would be able to see some clues. If the matter was serious enough, the vice hall master of the Three Mountain Hall might not be able to return. At this moment, the vice hall master of the Three Mountain Hall was more nervous and apprehensive than anyone else. He no longer dared to have any extravagant hopes that Su Juechen had made some great contribution and brought honor to the Three-Mountain Hall. Even the stupidest person could tell that Su Juechen must have made a huge mistake and caused a huge disaster to implicate him. He only prayed that bastard Su Juechen wouldn't cause too much trouble and cause him to be unable to clean up the mess. He might even be punished for implicating him. Now that the two hall masters had brought him away, they were definitely going to confront Su Juechen. The vice hall master thought to himself that when he saw Su Juechen later, he would definitely reprimand him. Furthermore, he wanted to push all of the blame onto Su Juechen and cast himself clean. He absolutely could not be implicated by him. Soon, the two hall masters brought the vice hall master to the cockpit of the warship. The first hall master was controlling the array to fly the warship. He looked at the front of the warship with his back to the crowd, but he still emitted an invisible pressure. This was the first time the vice hall master of the Three-Mountain Hall had been so close to the first hall master. Apart from excitement, he also felt fear. Unfortunately, he was being carried by the fourth hall master. Otherwise, he would definitely pay respects to the first hall master. Whoosh! The two hall masters entered the room. The fourth hall master threw the vice hall master of the Three-Mountain Hall onto the ground and bowed to the first hall master. First hall master, the person has been brought here. The Three-Mountain Hall master of the Three-Mountain Hall master was terrified. He did not dare to imagine what Su Juechen had done to infuriate the hall master of the three hall masters. He quickly crawled to his feet and bowed to the first hall master of the Three-Mountain Hall master. However, the first palace master was obviously not interested in his empty courtesy. He asked in a deep voice, "What's that person's name? Where did he come from?" The vice hall masters of the Three Mountains didn't dare to hide anything. They hurriedly reported Su Juechen's life experiences in detail. After hearing this, the first palace master fell into silence. He seemed to be analyzing Su Juechen's life experience, trying to find the problem. Why was it that an ostracized high god king of the Three-Mountain Hall who had disappeared for 10,000 years, could suddenly become a god emperor expert? Moreover, this god emperor had hidden his strength and sneaked into the 3,000 elite divine kings selected by the Shangqing Temple to assassinate the sixth hall master of the Shangqing Temple. Was there anything suspicious about this? Everyone's silence made the vice hall masters even more uneasy and fearful. He mustered up his courage and took the initiative to ask, "Three honorable hall masters, although Su Juechen is a citizen of our Three-Mountain Hall, this subordinate has no relationship with him at all and knows nothing about him. If he has committed a grave mistake, I hope that the three palace masters can understand that this has nothing to do with our Three-Mountain Hall. If I may be so bold as to ask, what crime did Su Juechen commit to make you so angry?" The third hallmaster and fourth hallmaster frowned at the same time. They were about to reprimand the vice hallmasters for interrupting the first hallmaster's thoughts. However, the first hallmaster said in a deep voice, "Su Juechen is a god emperor expert. He deliberately infiltrated the Shangqing Temple and colluded with the sea beast race in the depths of the Chaos Sea to assassinate the sixth hallmaster." Ah! Upon hearing this news, the vice hall masters felt like they had been struck by lightning. They were stunned on the spot and their eyes and expressions were filled with horror. They could not believe that the ostracized and depressed Su Juechen had become a god emperor expert and had even assassinated the sixth hallmaster. How shocking and absurd was this? However, the vice hall masters quickly snapped out of their shock and astonishment. They noticed something else. That was, Su Juechen had colluded with the sea beast race to assassinate the sixth hallmaster. The crime of colluding with the sea beast race was not a small one. It was an unforgivable crime of being an enemy of the entire desolate race and betraying the desolate race. According to the rules of the Shangqing Temple, committing such a crime was punishable by death and would implicate one's loved ones. The vice hall masters were so frightened that their legs turned to jelly. They quickly waved their hands and said in a sobbing tone, "Hall masters, please investigate this clearly. I really did not know about this. If I knew that Su Juechen was hiding his strength and harboring evil intentions, I would have risked my life to capture him and hand him over to you for punishment. These words were from the bottom of his heart, but the hallmasters were speechless. Nonsense. Su Juechen had been operating under our noses and had even deceived us hallmasters. You are just a vice hallmaster of the Three Mountain Hall, a mere peak divine king. How could you have seen through Su Juechen's disguise? Of course, the three hallmasters kept these words in their hearts and would never say it out loud. This was because it was too embarrassing. The Grand Hallmaster ignored the Vice Hallmaster's complaints and continued asking, now, Su Juechen has already escaped from the scene of the incident and seems to have fled to the south. We are trying our best to track him down. With your understanding and knowledge of Su Juechen, where do you think he will go next? Seeing that the Vice Hallmasters were about to cry again and deny their relationship with Su Juechen, the Grand Hallmaster added, tell us the truth. If you can tell us Su Juechen's whereabouts, I can pardon your crime and punishment. The Vice Hallmasters felt even more despair when they heard this. What did this mean? He had already been convicted by the three hallmasters and was about to be punished. He did not want to answer, but if he did not, he would not have the chance to redeem himself and would be punished. If he answered, it would show that he had some relationship with Su Juechen. The key point was that he did not know Su Juechen and could not guess where Su Juechen would go. This was a dilemma that left him at a loss of what to do. The Vice Hallmasters were so anxious that they did not know what to do. Their thoughts were in a mess, and they did not know what to say. The fourth Hallmaster frowned as he watched from the side. His face became colder and colder. He suggested, Grand Hallmaster, look at this guy's cowardice and helplessness. I don't think he can say anything. Why don't we kill him and use a secret technique to extract his soul and memories? Then, the truth will be revealed. Such a ruthless suggestion scared the Vice Hallmasters out of their wits. They fell to the ground and cried, I don't know, I really don't know. Lord Hallmaster, please don't kill me. Spare me. Chapter 46-34. Naturally, the three deputy hallmasters did not have a good ending. Of course, it was not tragic. The three hallmasters were sharp and experienced. Naturally, they could see that there was no relationship between him and Su Juechen. However, the three hallmasters were still angry. They had to find a reason to vent their anger. The three deputy hallmasters behaved so badly. Su Juechen was indeed selected and brought into Shangqing Divine Palace by him. No matter what, he could not absolve himself from the blame. Therefore, the first hallmaster still ordered the three deputy hallmasters to be punished. The reason was not because of his relationship with Su Juechen. It was because he was not strict with his subordinates and offended his superiors. The punishment was not too severe. He was only stripped of his position as deputy hallmaster, demoted to a commoner, and punished to reflect on his mistakes for 1,000 years. In the end, the three deputy hallmasters who escaped death left the cockpit dejectedly. They were carried back to the hall by 2 guards. The hundreds of elite divine kings who were waiting in the hall heaved a sigh of relief when they saw that the 3 deputy hallmasters had returned alive. From the looks of it, that guy called Su Juechen shouldn't have done anything too serious. However, the vice hallmasters of the 3 mountain sects looked as if they had lost their wits. Everyone was puzzled and confused. It was not a big deal. Why was he so frightened? Could it be that he was intimidated by the majesty of the palace masters? Or perhaps, the hall masters had used some sort of method to interrogate him? As the many elite god kings thought about it, they felt that the latter was more likely. In the cockpit of the warship, the 3 hall masters looked at each other and remained silent. After a while, the 3rd hall master spoke first. He asked, First hall master, the 3 deputy hall masters do not know Su Juechen. No one knows where Su Juechen went. Should we continue south and return? Or should we search in the Chaos Sea? The first Hall Master thought for a while and said, "There is no need to search in the Chaos Sea. The Chaos Sea is so vast. Where can we find him? Let's head south and return the way we came." Also, informed the second Hall Master to personally lead a group of elite divine kings to patrol the border between the Chaos Sea and the mainland. Maybe that Su Juechen is fast enough and the second Palace Master has a chance to intercept him. The third Palace Master and the fourth Palace Master nodded to show that they had complied. Actually, everyone knew in their hearts that the first Palace Master was only doing his best and leaving the rest to fate. Are you counting on the second Hall Master to bring people to the border of the Chaos Sea? The chances of killing Su Juechen were too slim. Did they expect to catch up with Su Juechen on the way to the south on a warship? The chances of that happening were very small. Simply put, this matter might be left unsettled. After all, the first Palace Master had only made a promise before. He would make the Shura God Emperor the sixth Lord of the Qin Temple. However, this matter had not been announced to the public yet. Ashura God Emperor, the sixth Palace Master. He hadn't received everyone's approval yet. To everyone. Do you still have doubts about the Ashura God Emperor? They didn't have any deep feelings for each other. Were they counting on the Shangqing Temple to come out in full force? It was also unrealistic to avenge him at all costs. Deep in the Chaos Sea. More than 2 million miles ahead of Grand Hall's flagship. A dazzling ray of divine light. It was speeding across the surface of the sea toward the south. Within this ray of golden divine light, there was a tall figure. It was Ji Tianqing. No, it should be Su Juechen. Was it just as first Palace Master had guessed? He had achieved his goal, so he naturally wouldn't stay in the Chaos Sea. The most important thing was to leave the Chaos Sea and stay away from danger. Even though the Gate of Heavenly Tao in the Evernight Sea region and the budding eternal flame had left a deep impression in his mind, he had never seen it before. If there was a chance in the future, he would definitely return to the Eternal Night Sea region to explore the mystery of the Gate of Heavenly Tao. But not now. His previous contact and observation had made him understand. Even if he had some mysterious connection with the Gate of Heavenly Tao, he might not have the strength to ignite the eternal fire now. If he rashly touched the Gate of Heavenly Tao, he wouldn't end up any better than the Ashura God Emperor. In the end, he had to thank First Palace Master and the Gate of Heavenly Tao for being able to successfully kill the Ashura God Emperor on this trip to the Chaos Sea. If First Palace Master hadn't been so overbearing and forced the Ashura God Emperor to open the Gate of Heavenly Tao, the Ashura God Emperor wouldn't have been so severely injured. It was precisely because the Ashura God Emperor's strength had plummeted and he was being chased by 2 God Emperor level sea beasts that Ji Tianqing had the opportunity to kill him completely. If the Ashura God Emperor was at his peak, Ji Tianqing would probably only be able to destroy his divine body at most. It would be very difficult to kill him. After all, every God Emperor level powerhouse was a supreme existence that looked down on the world. How could they die so easily? Ji Tianqing pondered silently as he hurried on his way. This was still the depths of the Chaos Sea. He would need to continue flying south for more than a month before he could reach land. During this period, he would have to experience many dangers, and there was even a chance that he would be attacked by the sea beasts. After returning to land, he wouldn't stay in the Shangqing Temple's territory any longer. He would continue east, pass through unknown lands, and enter the territory of the next temple to seek revenge on the other God Emperors. Only after I kill the god of the underworld, Dao Xingyun, and Lu Jiuyang will I have my revenge. At that time, I will return to the Evernight Sea and explore the mysteries of the Gate of Heavenly Tao and eternal life. With this in mind, Ji Tianqing had already determined his next plan. Of course, there was one more thing that he had to do as soon as possible. That was, to refine the Ashura God Emperor's divine spark fragment as soon as possible. After he refined the Ashura God Emperor's divine spark fragment, Not only would he be able to absorb the Azura God Emperor's power and divine laws, but he would also be able to obtain the memories of his divine soul. He believed that the Azura God Emperor was in contact with the other 3 God Emperors and should be more aware of each other's recent situation. After flying for a while, Ji Tianqing took out the god-slaying battleship, and the White Dragon drove the battleship. He stayed in the battleship, took out the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes Pagoda, and entered the distorted spacetime to refine the Azura God Emperor's divine spark fragment. Time passed quietly. Ji Tianqing was immersed in his cultivation. He was completely focused and had no distractions. The White Dragon didn't disappoint his master, and focused on driving the battleship to the south. He was well aware of the dangers of the Chaos Sea, and knew that he would encounter danger along the way, so he remained vigilant and on guard with all his might. After Ji Tianqing became a God Emperor, he spent a lot of time and effort, and reached a 3-year agreement with the beasts in exchange for many refining materials to upgrade the Burial of Heaven sword to Emperor grade. As for the God-slaying battleship, it was still a Supreme grade King grade item, and couldn't reach the God Emperor grade. Therefore, the God-slaying battleship's speed couldn't be compared to Ji Tianqing's. This also caused Ji Tianqing's speed to unknowingly slow down. Something that no one knew, and no one could predict, had happened. The distance between the Lord Hallmaster's battleship and Ji Tianqing's battleship was constantly shrinking. Judging from the speed at which the distance between the 2 sides was shrinking, there was no need to wait for Ji Tianqing to leave the Chaos Sea before the Lord Hallmaster's battleship caught up. Chapter 46-35. 5 days had passed. Bai Long controlled the god-slaying battleship and sped through the Chaos Sea. He encountered many dangerous traps and was also attacked by sea beasts several times. If the god-slaying battleship was an Emperor-level divine artifact, he would not be afraid of those traps and sea beasts at all. However, the god-slaying battleship was only a Supreme-grade King-level divine artifact. Bai Long was naturally extra careful. When he encountered those traps and dangerous areas, he would control the battleship to avoid them in advance. When he encountered the attacks of sea beasts, he would also control the battleship to avoid them as much as possible. If he really could not shake off the pursuit of those sea beasts, he would also control the divine artifact to counterattack. Just like that, 7 days passed without any danger. The distance between the god-slaying battleship and the Lord Paladin's ship was still closing. At noon on the 8th day, the god-slaying battleship faced a new danger. This time, it was not a trap or an attack by sea beasts. Instead, it was an exceptionally dazzling divine light that came from the Chaos Sea. It contained a terrifying power that could penetrate everything. Swish! That divine light descended from the sky and locked onto the god-slaying battleship. The beam of light was extremely fast. When Bai Long sensed the danger and reacted, the beam of light was already very close to the god-slaying battleship. At such a close distance, it was almost impossible for the god-slaying battleship to dodge the attack of the divine light. Bai Long also did not have time to dodge or resist. He could only activate the god-slaying battleship's power and form the strongest defensive shield. Boom! Crack! In the next moment, the dazzling red beam of light hit the god-slaying battleship, producing an earth-shattering sound. The god-slaying battleship's defensive shield was shattered into pieces on the spot. Fragments of divine light filled the sky. The divine light illuminated the surrounding tens of thousands of miles. The sea also stirred up huge waves that spread in all directions. The god-slaying battleship had been strengthened by Ji Tianqing many times and had long reached the peak of an Emperor-level divine artifact. However, this divine light was clearly cast by an Emperor-level expert. Its power far exceeded the range that an Emperor-level divine artifact could withstand. Accompanied by cracking sounds, the right string of the god-slaying battleship began to crack, forming a huge hole. Countless metal fragments flew with the wind and scattered on the sea surface, shining with divine light. Under the huge impact, the god-slaying battleship was also moved dozens of kilometers away and almost capsized in the Chaos Sea. After suffering such a violent impact and such serious damage, the soldiers inside the warship had long been awakened. Everyone was filled with anxiety and panic. They did not know what had happened. White Dragon was still able to remain calm. He quickly stabilized the warship and accelerated towards the south. As for the repair of the damaged areas of the warship, it could only be done when it was safe in the future. At the same time, White Dragon quickly used his divine sense to report the attack to his master. In fact, 7.5 days had passed in the outside world. Ji Tianqing had already been in closed-door cultivation in the Nine Heavens 10 Absolutes Pagoda for an entire year. In the past year, he had already refined the Shura God Emperor's quintessence shard. Not only had he absorbed an incomparably vast amount of divine energy, he had even refined several hundred types of divine Tao laws. Presently, the divine Tao laws he'd grasped had already arrived at over 2,500. If there were 3,000 great Taos in the world, he had already grasped more than 80% of them. Although his cultivation level was still at the initial God Emperor realm, he had still condensed 2 Taoist rhymes. However, after refining the Shura God Emperor's quintessence shard, the speed and progress of condensing his third Taoist rhyme had increased. He estimated that after another 2 to 3 years of closed-door cultivation, he would be able to condense his third Taoist rhyme. However, just as Ji Tianqing was about to cultivate his third Taoist rhyme as soon as possible, he sensed that the god-slaying battleship had been severely damaged. After all, the god-slaying battleship was a divine weapon that he had nurtured for many years. It was connected to his mind and soul. Without waiting for White Dragon's divine sense to inform him, he already knew that something had happened. Swoosh! When White Dragon informed him, he had already ended his cultivation. He left the Nine Heavens 10 Absolutes Pagoda and returned to the god-slaying battleship. He was about to head to the control room to ask White Dragon what had happened and how the god-slaying battleship was damaged. At that moment, a dark blue beam of light shot out from the chaotic fog in front of him. It shot down from the sky. Although this beam of light was of a different color, it was also locked onto the god-slaying battleship. Moreover, it was also shot by a god emperor. It was extremely powerful. It looked like the god-slaying battleship, which had been slowed down due to its damage, would not be able to dodge this beam of light. It was about to be hit by the dark blue beam of light again. At this critical moment, Ji Tianqing acted in time. He formed a sword with his right hand and instantly slashed out 1,000 feet long golden sword beam. Boom! Crack! Before the dark blue beam of light could hit the god-slaying battleship, the 1,000 feet long giant sword collided with it first. There was a loud explosion that shook the 9 heavens. Instantly, the 1,000 feet long giant sword and the dark blue beam of light shattered into countless shards of divine light. The violent shockwave sent the god-slaying battleship flying more than 10 miles away. However, the dark blue beam of light did not hit the battleship. Hence, the battleship was not damaged again. White Dragon saw the 1,000 feet long giant golden sword appear and knew that his master had made a move. He was instantly relieved. Before he could report the situation to his master's divine sense voice transmission rang out in his mind. There are 2 God Emperor level sea beasts lying in ambush here. They are not something you can deal with. Master will take care of them. Focus on repairing the battleship and calming the frightened soldiers. There is no need to worry about anything else. After hearing his master's divine sense voice transmission, White Dragon was shocked. Only now did he realize that there were 2 God Emperor level sea beasts lying in ambush here. However, his master's tone and attitude were very calm, which made him feel even more at ease. He hurriedly replied, "Understood." At this moment, Ji Tianqing waved his hand and drew the god-slaying battleship back into his body. This way, no matter how much he fought with the 2 God Emperor level sea beasts, it would not affect the god-slaying battleship or the soldiers on board. White Dragon could also first calm the frightened soldiers and then think of a way to repair the battleship. Swish! In the blink of an eye, only Ji Tianqing was left on the gloomy surface of the Chaos Sea. The surface of the Chaos Sea around him was still surging with waves and divine light flying everywhere. In the chaos fog above his head, a whirlpool rose into the sky, flashing with red and blue divine light. Ji Tianqing stood on the surface of the chaotic sea as he looked up at the gloomy sky that surged with wind and clouds, and then he shouted angrily in a low voice. "Which vile being actually dares to obstruct me here, and you're even hiding and not showing yourself?" In fact, he knew very well that there were only a few God Emperor level sea beasts circling this area of the sea. Previously, the 4 God Emperor level sea beasts had joined forces with Blue Dragon and Yubingxin to attack the fleet of the Shangqing Temple and engage in a fierce battle with the Temple Masters. Logically speaking, those God Emperor level sea beasts should have been more or less injured and should be hiding to heal their wounds. Why didn't they stop and ambush his battleship again? Chapter 46-36. Ji Tianqing's deafening voice reverberated between heaven and earth. The 2 sea beasts hiding in the chaotic fog didn't respond, nor did they show themselves. Seeing that they didn't respond, Ji Tianqing didn't waste any more time with them and continued to fly south. The 2 sea beasts naturally wouldn't let him go. They also traveled through the chaotic fog and followed Ji Tianqing to the south. In truth, it wasn't that they didn't dare to show themselves, but that they were still puzzled and were discussing secretly. Of these 2 God Emperor level sea beasts, one was a giant black-brown scorpion that was 10,000 feet long and had a pair of wide scarlet wings. It was called the Scorpion Ancestor. The other was a giant, dark blue fish that was 30,000 feet long. Its body was like a whale or a kuan, and it had a terrifying bloody mouth and 2 pairs of wings. Its name was Kuan Sha. Like the Scorpion Ancestor, it was an ancient creature that was born 100,000 years ago. The sea region closest to the Evernight Sea region was their territory. If they continued south for 5 days, they would leave their territory. 2 of the 4 God Emperor level sea beasts that attacked the Shangqing Temple fleet and besieged the Lord Hallmaster were among them. The other 2 God Emperor level sea beasts were the Blue Dragon and Yubingxin. As for the 2 sea beasts that besieged the Azura God Emperor and joined forces with Ji Tianqing to kill the Azura God Emperor, they were the lords of the southern sea region. The Scorpion Ancestor and Kuan Sha had left the Evernight Sea region a few days ago and returned to their own territories. However, they received reports from their subjects that an unfamiliar warship was speeding through their territory, injuring many sea beasts and their subjects along the way. When the Scorpion Ancestor and Kuan Sha heard the news, they hurried over to intercept and kill the unfamiliar warship. In their minds, even the Shangqing Temple fleet had been destroyed by them. Although they couldn't defeat the Lord Hallmasters of the Shangqing Temple, anyone else apart from the Shangqing Temple would be courting death if they dared to act so presumptuously here. Hence, Kuan Sha and Scorpion Ancestor arrived at this sea region. After discovering the god-slaying battleship, they launched an attack without hesitation. Seeing that the Scorpion Ancestor's first attack had managed to seriously injure the god-slaying warship, the 2 of them felt extremely relaxed. In fact, they even felt contempt for the Scorpion Ancestor. Kuan Sha used his divine ability again and released a second attack, preparing to sink the god-slaying battleship in one fell swoop. They never expected that a desolate race god emperor would suddenly appear from the god-slaying battleship, blocking Kuan Sha's attack. Not only that, the desolate race god emperor had also put away the god-slaying battleship and shouted into the chaos fog, forcing them to appear. Kuan Sha and Scorpion Ancestor immediately turned alert. They secretly sized up the desolate race's god emperor, trying to figure out his background and origins. At a glance, they were certain that the young desolate race god emperor was definitely not the temple lord of the Shangqing Divine Palace. From the first Hall Master to the 5th Hall Master, they had met all of them. Even for the newly appointed 6th Hall Master, they had not seen his true appearance, but the sixth Hall Master was already dead. Hence, this desolate race god emperor was definitely not the temple lord of the Shang-Qing divine palace. However, Kun Sha and Scorpion Ancestor had a nagging feeling that this person definitely had something to do with the Shang-Qing divine palace. If not, how could it be such a coincidence that the desolate race god emperor had appeared when the Shang-Qing divine palace was exploring the Chaos Sea? Other than this, Kun Sha and Scorpion Ancestor were unable to find any more clues from their research. Without being able to figure out the desolate race god emperor's identity and origins, Kun Sha and Scorpion Ancestor were in no hurry to make a move. They decided to continue observing. Just like that, another day passed. No matter how fast Ji Tianqing traveled, the Chaos Sea was the sea beast race's home ground. Kun Sha and Scorpion Ancestor could be said to be well endowed by nature, like fish in water. As such, Kun Sha and Scorpion Ancestor continued to follow closely behind him. There was no way to shake them off. Seeing that Ji Tianqing had been traveling for an entire day, his speed was nothing special. In terms of strength, there was nothing special about him. As such, Kun Sha and Scorpion Ancestor's wariness gradually relaxed. They no longer had any concerns and finally joined forces to cast spells, besieging Ji Tianqing. Swoosh! Swoosh! In the chaos fog, a dazzling divine light lit up again. Inky blue and crimson-red divine light condensed into more than 100 gigantic light blades. Mixed with wind, fire, and lightning that filled the sky, they poured down like a torrential flood. From the looks of it, Ji Tianqing was about to be drowned by the sky full of saber beams, sword shadows, wind, fire, and lightning. As for Ji Tianqing, he was constantly on guard against the attacks of the two sea beasts, so he naturally did not fall for it. He used his teleportation technique in a timely manner, traversing 20,000 miles in a step, escaping the center of the saber beams, sword shadows, wind, fire, and lightning. Following that, he conjured the burial of Heaven's sword and brandished hundreds of dazzling sword beams to meet the dozens of gigantic light blades. Bam! 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 The sacred golden sword beams collided with the dozens of light blades in the sky, creating a series of muffled explosions. Violent shockwaves mixed with countless fragments of divine light spread in all directions. After the divine light filled the sky, Ji Tianqing took another step and retreated 20,000 miles, escaping the danger. He turned to face Kun Sha and Scorpion Ancestor. The two sides were 20,000 miles apart, facing each other across the sky. Scorpion Ancestor originally wanted to use his super-fast speed to rush to Ji Tianqing's front and join forces with Kun Sha to surround Ji Tianqing and attack him. Unexpectedly, Ji Tianqing did not give them a chance at all. Left with no choice, Kun Sha and Scorpion Ancestor could only fight side by side. They once again unleashed destructive spells to attack Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing was fighting against two alone. Even if the opponent's strength was 2 levels higher than his, he was not afraid at all. Absolute shadows of 10 directions. Facing two powerful enemies, he did not hesitate to use his ultimate skill to create 9 doppelgangers. The 9 doppelgangers, including him, had a total of 10 figures. They all had the strength and power of a god emperor. They formed a formation in the sky and surrounded Kun Sha and Scorpion Ancestor. Such an absurd change caused the Kun Shark and the Scorpion Ancestor to be dumbstruck and filled with astonishment. While they were stunned, Ji Tianqing and his 9 doppelgangers attacked at the same time. They waved their swords and used hundreds of Sword Dao ultimate skills and all kinds of divine powers. The sky-covering sword light and colorful divine powers enveloped an area of 20,000 miles, including Kun Sha and Scorpion Ancestor. The two sea beasts had no choice but to dispel their underestimation. They used their full strength to fight back seriously and cautiously. Boom boom boom. Boom boom boom. The divine powers and divine powers from both sides clashed fiercely in the sky, creating deafening explosions that did not disappear for a long time. Kuan Sha and Scorpion Ancestor originally thought that they could easily defeat Ji Tianqing and even kill him. However, as time passed, the more they fought, the more fearful they became. They even had the thought of retreating. Ji Tianqing's true combat strength was far beyond his realm. He was almost on par with them who had condensed 4 Daoist rhymes. Moreover, Ji Tianqing had the help of his 9 doppelgangers. He had an advantage in numbers. Kuan Sha and Scorpion Ancestor were already injured and their strength had decreased. Now, they were besieged by Ji Tianqing and his 9 doppelgangers. The two sides exchanged hundreds of blows, but they couldn't gain the slightest advantage. They could only fight on par with Ji Tianqing, and there was no clear victor. Chapter 46-37. Seeing that Ji Tianqing was so powerful, Kuan Sha and the Scorpion Ancestor could not help but be shocked and anxious. At the same time, they both regretted it. If they had known that this person's combat strength was so powerful, they would not have taken the initiative to provoke him. Anyway, this person did not invade their territory and showed signs of wantonly slaughtering the sea beasts. He was just passing by this sea. If they pretended not to notice and pretended that nothing had happened, they would not be in such a predicament. Now, even if they wanted to retreat, they might not be able to do so. Ji Tianqing and his 9 clones besieged them. Although they did not have the upper hand, they would not give up easily, let alone let them escape. Kuan Sha and the Scorpion Ancestor fought fiercely while discussing how to retreat unscathed. After discussing for a while, they could not think of an effective method, so they could only fight and retreat. Ji Tianqing was heading south, while Kuan Sha and the Scorpion Ancestor were chasing from the north. Naturally, they retreated to the north. As time passed, the battlefield of the two sides also shifted to the north. 30,000 kilometers, 50,000 kilometers, 80,000 kilometers, Ji Tianqing had the help of his 9 clones and was not afraid of Kuan Sha and the Scorpion Ancestor at all. However, his clones could not exist for a long time. At most, they would last for an hour before naturally dissipating. Before his clones dissipated, both sides had already moved 250,000 kilometers to the north. Ji Tianqing suddenly thought of something, and a trace of worry flashed across his heart. Since these 2 sea beasts have come here, the hall masters of the Shangqing Temple should also be on their way back. Unless they have other missions, they will not stay in the Chaos Sea. Otherwise, they might have to pass by this place. If he kept flying south, he could still maintain a certain distance from the hall masters of the Shangqing Temple. However, if he and the 2 sea beasts moved north, they would close the distance between them and the hall masters. It was very likely that they would encounter them in advance. Therefore, Ji Tianqing was vigilant and planned to stop fighting. However, Kuan Sha and Scorpion Ancestor were very astute. When they saw Ji Tianqing's 9 doppelgangers disappear, they immediately became spirited and erupted with even stronger combat strength. The divine ability that Kid executed just now was too strange. He was actually able to create 9 clones, and all of them possessed the combat strength of a god emperor. That's too terrifying. Now, all of his clones have dissipated, and he's the only one left. Let's see how he fends off our attacks. As far as I know, as long as it's that kind of powerful divine ability, there will be different degrees of backlash. After the casting of the divine ability, the user's combat strength will plummet. That's right. He couldn't defeat us even after summoning 9 doppelgangers. Now that his doppelgangers have dissipated, his strength will be greatly reduced. No wonder he had the intention to retreat and escape just now. Now is the best time to kill him, we can't let him go. Kuan Sha and Scorpion Ancestor discussed through voice transmissions as they sped up their attacks, besieging Ji Tianqing. Without the help of his 9 clones, Ji Tianqing's combat strength naturally plummeted. But Kuan Sha and Scorpion Ancestor guessed wrongly. His Absolute Shadow's divine ability would not have a backlash at all. In reality, His combat strength did not have any obvious changes from before, and there was no backlash or damage. But Kun Sha and Scorpion Ancestor's psychological influence was too strong. Their overflowing confidence could indeed affect their combat strength, suppressing Ji Tianqing until he was constantly forced to retreat. Therefore, the battlefield of both sides began to shift south again. Reality proved that Ji Tianqing's worries were very reasonable and were quickly verified. Both sides fought for 4 hours in a stalemate, constantly shifting south, but the speed was very slow. Just as both sides' battle reached the most critical juncture and victory was about to be decided, a dazzling divine light sped over from the north. Whoosh! That was a dark golden divine light that flew out of the darkness, streaking across the night sky as fast as lightning, rapidly approaching the battlefield. When the divine light was only tens of thousands of miles away from the battlefield, one could vaguely see a figure that was thousands of feet long in the divine light. That was not a sea beast, but a majestic battleship with a sacred appearance. Without a doubt, that was the battleship of the Grand Hallmaster of the Shangqing Temple. In the cockpit of the battleship, the Grand Hallmaster, Third Hallmaster, and Fourth Hallmaster were standing together, looking at the night sky in front of the battleship, discussing with solemn expressions. We are still hundreds of thousands of miles away, but we can see the divine light shining in front of us. There are all kinds of divine arts flashing. I wonder who is fighting here. Judging from the brilliance of the divine light and the scale of the divine arts, it is most likely God Emperor powerhouses fighting. Otherwise, it would not be so conspicuous. This is strange. What God Emperor powerhouses can there be in the Chaos Sea? Other than us, there are only a few God Emperor level sea beasts left. Could it be that they have an internal strife and are killing each other? The Third Hallmaster and Fourth Hallmaster discussed for a while, feeling puzzled. At this moment, the First Palace Master's sudden words stunned the two Palace Masters, and their spirits shook. Don't forget, other than us and the few sea beasts, there is still a God Emperor. Hearing the Grand Hallmaster's reminder, the two Hallmasters' eyes lit up and they became excited. I understand. The Grand Hallmaster is talking about, that guy. It's very possible. That darn desolate race God Emperor must have had a conflict with the sea beasts. If it's really that desolate race God Emperor, and he is fighting the sea beasts, it means that they are not in cahoots. The Grand Hallmaster glanced at the two of them and said in a deep voice, it's too early to jump to such an arbitrary conclusion. Even if that desolate race God Emperor is fighting the sea beasts, it does not mean that there is no relationship between them. Maybe it's an internal strife. After the Third Hallmaster and Fourth Hallmaster heard this, they nodded their heads in agreement. That makes sense. The Grand Hallmaster is wise and far-sighted. Just as the three Hallmasters were conversing, the battleship had already flown 100,000 miles across the night sky and arrived near the battlefield. When it was 30,000 miles away from the battlefield, the battleship slowed down and circled in the night sky. At this moment, the three Hallmasters could clearly see the situation on the battlefield. Although the battlefield in front of them was very chaotic, with the sky filled with divine technique light and colorful divine light, the three Hallmasters were still able to discern it clearly. However, the three Hallmasters could still tell that there were two gigantic and ferocious-looking sea beasts attacking a desolate race god the Arch. It's him. It's that bastard, Su Juechen from the Three Mountain Hall. The Third Hallmaster and Fourth Hallmaster saw the desolate race figure clearly and instantly identified him. Immediately, their eyes flashed as their bodies emitted intense killing intent. It was not only the two of them, even the Grand Hallmaster's eyebrows pricked up. A sinister sneer suffused on his lips as a cold beam flashed in his eyes. It's really a case of searching high and low, only to find him by sheer luck. We did not search for him in the Chaos Sea, but we met him on the way back. Furthermore, it was Kun Shan's Scorpion Ancestor who stopped him. Her. He is destined to be killed by us. Could this be heaven's will? Chapter 46-38. Seeing Kun Sha and Scorpion Ancestor besieging Su Juechen, the three Hall Masters were pleasantly surprised. Originally, they no longer had much hope of killing Su Juechen and avenging the sixth Hall Master. They did not expect to encounter Su Juechen on their way back to Shangqing Temple after leaving the Chaos Sea. This was definitely a pleasant surprise. Even so, the three Hall Masters did not act rashly. Instead, they observed the situation and looked for a suitable opportunity to strike. The first Hall Master waved his hand and cast a spell. He controlled the warship to enter an invisible state and quietly float in the night sky. Rumble. 30,000 miles away, Ji Tianqing was still fighting and retreating. He used all kinds of supernatural powers and ultimate skills to resist the besiegement of Kun Sha and Scorpion Ancestor. Ji Tianqing was exhausted from resisting, but he was not injured. However, he was besieged by Kun Sha and Scorpion Ancestor and could not escape. As time passed, Ji Tianqing's divine power was constantly depleted, and his combat power was gradually weakening. As he resisted the besiegement of Kun Sha and Scorpion Ancestor, he gradually felt powerless and had no choice but to continue retreating to the south. At this time, Kun Sha and Scorpion Ancestor finally seized the opportunity to pursue Ji Tianqing even more fiercely. The momentum of their attacks was also more violent. Ji Tianqing's decline was even more obvious. In order to preserve his strength, the momentum of his retreat was even more urgent. This was not only because of Kun Sha and Scorpion Ancestor's attack, but also because Ji Tianqing had long noticed the arrival of the first Hall Master's warship. When the first Hall Master's warship arrived, he only caught a glimpse and did not see the warship's full appearance clearly. However, Ji Tianqing only needed to see that it was a warship in the divine light to guess the origin and identity of the warship. Now, there was no one else other than Shangqing Temple's warship sailing in the Chaos Sea. Shangqing Temple's fleet was almost completely annihilated. It seemed that only the first Hall Master's warship was preserved. Therefore, the identity of that divine warship was obvious. Ji Tianqing was not afraid of Kun Sha and the Scorpion Ancestor. He had already guessed that the Lord Hall Master's ship had arrived, and several Hall Masters of the Shangqing Temple were eyeing them covetously. Under such circumstances, how could he possibly fight Kun Sha and the Scorpion Ancestor with all his might? Wouldn't that be cutting off his escape route and giving the Temple Masters of the Shangqing Temple a chance to take advantage of him? The warship was hidden under the chaotic fog, overlooking the battlefield. As Ji Tianqing, Kun Sha, and Scorpion Ancestor moved south, the battleship also gradually moved south. The three palace masters had been keeping a close eye on the battlefield. When they saw Ji Tianqing had the intention to retreat, they sped up and fled towards the south. The warship also sped up to follow. Kun Sha and the Scorpion Ancestor were not foolish. Of course, they could sense the existence of the battleship. They were no stranger to that battleship. Back then, it had led an army of sea beasts to besiege the fleet of the Shangqing Temple. They also maintained vigilance towards that God-Emperor level battleship. The fleet of the Shangqing Temple was almost completely annihilated. Only that battleship survived. With Kun Sha and the Scorpion Ancestor's wisdom, they could naturally guess that it was the Lord Hall Master's ship of the Shangqing Temple. There were also several Hall Masters on board. They had to weigh the pros and cons. What did the Shangqing Temple want to do? Why were they hiding and spying on the sidelines but not making a move? The Hall Masters of the Shangqing Temple were naturally not good people. They would definitely take the opportunity to cause trouble. But it was still unknown who they would make a move on. Therefore, while Kun Sha and the Scorpion Ancestor were chasing Ji Tianqing, they also maintained vigilance. They did not dare to use their full strength. In this way, the three parties maintained vigilance against each other in the process of moving south. Under the situation where Kun Sha and the Scorpion Ancestor did not dare to pursue with full strength, the pressure on Ji Tianqing was greatly reduced, and he had a chance to escape. He took the opportunity to use the "so close, yet so far" skill and instantly teleported 100,000 miles, temporarily shaking off Kun Sha and the Scorpion Ancestor, as well as the Lord Hall Master's ship that was following closely. However, Kun Sha and the Scorpion Ancestor had a unique advantage in the Chaos Sea. They also used their ultimate skills and used the power of the Chaos Fog to travel 90,000 miles in an instant and catch up with Ji Tianqing. Only the Lord Hull Master's ship relied on flying at full speed to gradually catch up with Ji Tianqing and the two sea beasts. Seeing that the Lord Hull Master's ship was so persistent and following closely, it was obvious that he wanted to kill them. Kun Sha and the Scorpion Ancestor finally hesitated. They could not make up their minds and could not guess what the lords of the Shangqing Temple wanted to do. However, the two of them discussed privately and agreed that the Shangqing Temple was more likely to target them. After all, both sides had previously fought in the depths of the Chaos Sea and had formed a grudge. As for the lords of the Shangqing Temple, they were the same as the Desolate Race's God Emperor. They were also the Desolate Race's God Emperor, so they should have some connection. However, Kun Sha and the Scorpion Ancestor could not guess why the lords of the Shangqing Temple were following them from afar and did not help. They didn't know what kind of grudge or conflict existed between the sect masters and Ji Tianqing. However, they could not continue their pursuit as it would definitely put them in an even more dangerous situation. Hence, Kun Sha and the Scorpion Ancestor gradually slowed down and changed their direction. They gradually gave up on pursuing Ji Tianqing and left the battlefield. At this moment, the Lord Hull Master's ship accelerated and caught up. Upon seeing this scene, Kun Sha and the Scorpion Ancestor were somewhat shocked and anxious. They subconsciously believed that they were about to retreat, causing the Lord Hull Master's ship to accelerate its pursuit. This proved that the targets of the lords of the Shangqing Temple were the two of them. However, when they sped up to escape, they realized that the Lord Hull Master's ship did not chase after them. Instead, it went straight for the Desolate Race's God Emperor. Upon seeing this scene, Kun Sha and the Scorpion Ancestor heaved a sigh of relief. It looks like we were overthinking things. Thankfully, they are not targeting us, or it would be troublesome. Strange, they are both the Desolate Race's God Emperor. Shouldn't they be in the same group? Who knows? Let's hide by the side and observe the situation. Kun Sha and the Scorpion Ancestor hid in the Chaos Fog. As they followed Ji Tianqing and the Lord Hull Master's ship, they communicated via voice transmissions. As such, the situation on the battlefield changed. Kun Sha and the Scorpion Ancestor went from being participants to being bystanders. As for the bystanders from before, the lords of the Shangqing Temple had become participants. The Lord Hull Master's ship accelerated and caught up to Ji Tianqing in a short span of 100 seconds. Swoosh! The Lord Hull Master, who was dressed in a purple robe and wearing a divine crown, flew out of the battleship with a scepter in hand. He stood at the top of the battleship and stared at Ji Tianqing in front of him. He bellowed angrily, "Su Juechen. Your time of death has come. Don't even think of escaping. Surrender." The dull sound waves spread across tens of thousands of miles, reverberating between the heavens and earth. The Lord Hull Master's body emitted a terrifying killing intent as he locked onto Ji Tianqing's aura. His eyes flashed with a sharp cold beam. Ji Tianqing sped up without looking back. When he heard the Lord Hull Master shout, he thought to himself, although I killed the Azura God Emperor, is there such a deep relationship between the Shangqing Temple and the Azura God Emperor? Why are they so determined to avenge the Azura God Emperor? Chapter 46-39. Of course, Ji Tianqing did not believe that the Shangqing Temple had deep feelings for the Azura God Emperor. After coming to the Star of Origin for so long, he had a good understanding of the Desolate Race. In all fairness, the Desolate Race was still very wary of other races. The reason why the Grand Palace Master stood out and wanted to kill him to avenge the Azura God Emperor could only be said to be a coincidence. If the Grand Palace Master and company had not coincidentally met him on their way back, he did not believe that the Grand Palace Masters would take the initiative to search for him. Although Ji Tianqing had guessed this point, it was of no help to the current situation. Swoosh! Swoosh! The battleship lit up with a dazzling divine light again. Two figures flew out and landed behind the Grand Palace Master. Ji Tianqing looked back and saw that it was the third and fourth Palace Masters. The third and fourth Palace Masters did not shout at him. Instead, they looked behind them and stared at the chaotic fog where Kun Sha and Scorpion Ancestor were hiding. They shouted loudly, "Kun Sha, Scorpion Ancestor, even if you are hiding, you can't hide from my eyes. We will settle our scores in the future. Now, this is a grudge between me and Su Juechen. If you know what's good for you, leave this place immediately. If you dare to interfere in this matter, don't blame us for killing you both." Kun Sha and Scorpion Ancestor wanted to lurk by the side and spy on them. They wanted to find a suitable opportunity to strike. Compared to killing Su Juechen, they wanted to kill the Grand Palace Masters of the Shangqing Temple. After all, the Shangqing Temple's power was deeply rooted and had a history of tens of thousands of years. In the past 30,000 years, the Shangqing Temple had sent the God Emperor many times to lead a large number of elite God Kings to explore the depths of the Chaos Sea. This posed a great threat to Kun Sha and Scorpion Ancestors' territory. Both sides had fought many times and suffered tragic casualties. They had long formed a blood feud. It would have been better if the two Palace Masters had not shouted. Kun Sha and the Scorpion Ancestor could still decide whether to attack or not based on the situation. Kun Sha and the Scorpion Ancestor were both enraged after the two Palace Masters spoke in a forceful manner. "Damned bastard, who does he think he is? What's so great about Shangqing Temple? Over the past tens of thousands of years, haven't we slaughtered tens of thousands of elites? You want us to leave and not interfere in their feud with Su Juechen? Impossible. Whatever the Shangqing Temple wants to do, we will stop and destroy it." Kun Sha and the Scorpion Ancestor did not reveal themselves. They were still hiding in the chaotic fog as they discussed secretly. Seeing Scorpion Ancestor become more agitated the more he spoke, Kun Sha hurriedly dissuaded, "Don't be agitated. Of course, we can't let the bastards of Shangqing Temple succeed. We have to make them pay a price. However, we don't have to participate in the battle between them and Su Juechen. We just need to reap the benefits." Scorpion Ancestor came back to his senses and hurriedly nodded, "That's right, I didn't think it through. Let's continue to watch the battle." Just as Kun Sha and the Scorpion Ancestor were discussing secretly, the Palace Master had already attacked Ji Tianqing. In the Palace Master's view, Su Juechen had just fought with Kun Sha and the Scorpion Ancestor. He was in a state where his divine power was greatly exhausted and had yet to recover. This was the best opportunity to kill him. He would never give Su Juechen a chance to breathe and recover his divine power. Heavenly Wasteland Judgment. The Palace Master stood on the warship with his left hand behind his back and his right hand holding the scepter. He pointed at the dark night sky and then chopped down at Ji Tianqing. Suddenly, in the dark night sky that was covered by chaotic fog, a holy golden light that was tens of thousands of feet long and could split heaven and earth lit up. It fell from the sky and chopped down fiercely. The golden light was like the scorching sun that dispelled the darkness. It was also like the sword of heavenly wasteland that fell from the sky to judge all evil. Before the golden light arrived, a terrifying pressure had already enveloped Ji Tianqing, firmly suppressing him and making him unable to move. At this moment, Ji Tianqing truly felt how terrifying the power of an upper state god emperor was. With his current strength, he was still not strong enough to fight against the Palace Master. However, he could not sit still and wait for death. He could only draw on the power of the five elements world, hold the sword of burial of heaven tightly with both hands, and use his trump card. Sword of World Destruction. Ji Tianqing roared angrily. Holding the sword of burial of heaven with both hands, he fiercely chopped out a golden sword light that was tens of thousands of feet long to meet the heavenly wasteland judgment descending from the sky. Boom! Crack! The next moment, two dazzling golden lights collided in the night sky, producing a deafening explosion that shook the sea for tens of thousands of miles. The two golden lights collapsed at the same time, shattering into hundreds of thousands of pieces. They were like golden butterflies that blotted out the sky, fluttering in the violent waves of chi. The divine power shockwave produced by the explosion carried with it countless fragments of golden light, spreading out in all directions and covering an area of tens of thousands of miles. The surface of the chaotic sea that had just calmed down began to boil again. Huge waves that were tens of thousands of feet high surged, producing a loud noise that shook the heavens. The collision of these two golden lights was a battle between two peerless sovereigns. Its power was terrifying to the extreme. Only a god-emperor expert was qualified to watch the battle from tens of thousands of miles away. If a god-king expert was here, even if they were touched by the shockwaves, they would be smashed to smithereens. Accompanied by an earth-shaking explosion, a figure flew through the sky of fragments of golden light and drifted toward the south. Everyone thought that the first Hallmaster had used all his strength to execute the heavenly desolation judgment, and that he would definitely be able to kill Su Juechen instantly. Even Kun Sha and the Scorpion Ancestor, who were hidden in the chaotic fog, thought so. They had fought with the first Hallmaster before, and they knew very well how terrifying his strength was. However, no one expected that the figure that drifted through the sky of fragments of golden light was actually Su Juechen. Su Juechen did not die. He was not killed by the golden light, and his divine body was still intact. Even though he was pushed back by the violent force and was sent flying tens of thousands of miles away. However, after he spat out a mouthful of blood, he was able to suppress his injuries and use the recoil force to speed up his escape to the south. Swish! In just a breath's time, he had first flown tens of thousands of miles away. Then, he used the ultimate technique, so close, yet so far, and instantly teleported tens of thousands of miles away. This scene not only stunned the first Hallmaster, but also the third Hallmaster and the fourth Hallmaster. Even Kun Sha and the Scorpion Ancestor, who were hiding in the chaotic fog, were stunned and tongue-tied. My God! That guy is not dead. He's still alive and kicking. When the first Hallmaster of Shangqing Temple was besieged by the four of us, he also used the heavenly desolation judgment. At that time, the two of us joined forces with the Blue Dragon to barely block it. Even then, the two of us were slightly injured. Yes. The power of the heavenly desolation judgment is extremely terrifying, but Su Juechen actually neutralized it. Even if he was seriously injured and spat out blood, as long as he's still alive, I find it incredible. Not only did that guy survive, but he also took the opportunity to escape. Chapter 4640. That's right. Ji Tianxing took advantage of the fact that the three Hallmasters and the two sea beasts were still in a daze to use so close, yet worlds apart to teleport 50,000 kilometers away. The three Hallmasters and the two sea beasts all thought that he would be killed instantly. Unexpectedly, not only did he survive, but he also maintained his mobility and took the opportunity to escape. In fact, he had a different way of thinking compared to Kun Sha, Scorpion Ancestor, and Blue Dragon when it came to neutralizing the heavenly wasteland judgment. The three God Emperor level sea beasts only thought of how to defend themselves and prevent themselves from being injured. But reality proved that the three of them together could not completely block it. Kun Sha and Scorpion Ancestor were still injured. But Ji Tianxing was different. He knew his own strengths and weaknesses. He definitely could not block the heavenly wasteland judgment. Therefore, he used his strongest divine ability and used the Sword of Annihilation to resist the heavenly wasteland judgment. It was both a confrontation and a neutralization. This method was indeed more effective. The power of the Sword of Annihilation was comparable to the Heavenly Wasteland Judgment. When the two collapsed at the same time, the Heavenly Wasteland Judgment was neutralized. Even if some of the remaining power hit Ji Tianqing, causing him to be seriously injured and even vomiting blood, it was not a serious injury. However, that injury was not serious enough to be considered a serious injury. Otherwise, wouldn't the celestial river body tempering secret art he had cultivated for countless years be useless? He used the recoil to retreat tens of thousands of kilometers away. He still had the strength to use so close, yet worlds apart to escape 100,000 kilometers in an instant. So close, yet worlds apart was one of his last life-saving methods on the planet of origin. Whoosh! When Ji Tianqing escaped 130,000 kilometers away, the three Hall Masters finally reacted and immediately began to pursue him. This time, in order to catch up to Ji Tianqing as soon as possible, they did not even control the warship. The head Hall Master waved his hand and shrunk the 1,000-meter-long warship into a speck of dust and put it back into his body. The three Hall Masters turned into streams of light and sped through the night sky, traveling 10,000 kilometers in an instant. Kuan Sha and Scorpion Ancestor, who were hiding in the chaotic fog, also came back to their senses. They quickly sped up in the fog and chased after Ji Tianqing and the three Hall Masters. No matter what, they couldn't miss this wonderful show. Su Juechen. You damned bastard, I'll definitely kill you. The first palace master gritted his teeth angrily and cursed fiercely as he traveled at lightning speed. He originally thought that he could easily kill Su Juechen. After all, his cultivation level was much higher than his opponent's. However, the result was a slap to his face, causing him to lose all face. Even if it wasn't for the sake of avenging the Shura God Emperor, he still wouldn't let Su Juechen off just to save face. However, the third Hall Master and the fourth Hall Master, who were following closely behind him, had complicated expressions. After the two of them discussed secretly for a while, they said to the first Hall Master, "First Hall Master, I wonder if you have noticed a problem. Lord Hall Master, that Su Juechen, is very problematic." The first Hall Master was in a fit of anger. All he cared about was how to chase up to Ji Tianqing and kill him. Hearing the two Hall Masters speaking in riddles, he naturally didn't have a pleasant expression. He said in a deep voice, "If there's a problem, just say it." The third Hall Master's expression stiffened. He didn't dare to keep them in suspense and said directly, "The divine power Su Juechen used and the divine powers and spells he used seem to be different from ours." The fourth Hall Master added on, "I have a nagging feeling that his divine power and divine powers and spells don't seem to belong to our desolate race." After the two Hall Masters' reminder, the first Hall Master finally reacted. After frowning for a moment, he nodded slightly and said, "That's right. I also noticed this point. At first, I thought he was from the desolate race. However, on careful thought, he isn't as simple as being from the desolate race. He seems to have some similarities with the Shura God Emperor." The third Hall Master immediately followed up and reminded him, "Since he is from the desolate race, and he seems to be similar to the Shura God Emperor, then why does he look like a member of the desolate race? Also, whether he is the Tri-Mountain Hall's Su Juechen or not is still a question." The first Hall Master fell silent for a moment before he finally analyzed the crux of the problem. "I suspect that guy is not the Tri-Mountain Hall's Su Juechen, but a desolate God Emperor. And he only possessed Su Juechen and used Su Juechen's appearance to do things, which made everyone lower their guard." The third Hall Master and the fourth Hall Master hurriedly nodded in agreement and expressed their opinions. "That's right. The first Hall Master's analysis is very reasonable. Only this can explain why Su Juechen seems to be a different person after disappearing for 10,000 years. It's not difficult to understand why that guy attacked the Shura God Emperor. It's because he is not Su Juechen, but a member of the desolate race like the Shura God Emperor. There must be an old grudge between the two." As the Hall Master of the Shangqing Divine Hall, his wisdom and insight were unquestionable. Previously, they did not notice Ji Tianqing, but now that the first hall master had exchanged a blow with Ji Tianqing, they could tell something was amiss. Ji Tianqing's identity would be exposed as a result. The first hall master stared at Ji Tianqing, who was escaping in front of him. His expression turned gloomy as he said coldly, "Since that guy is the desolate god emperor and has possessed Su Juechen to carry out his schemes, then all the more we cannot let him live. If we let him escape back to the mainland, who knows how much bloodshed he will cause." After saying that, the first hall master waved his scepter again. His body emitted a golden light as he used his ultimate skill to speed up his journey. Heavenly Star's Rotation. Phew! As the dazzling golden light flashed, the first hall master's figure disappeared and instantly appeared 80,000 miles away. The distance between him and Ji Tianqing was immediately shortened to about 50,000 miles. The third hall master and the fourth hall master no longer held back. They used their ultimate skills to speed up their pursuit. As for Kun Sha and the scorpion ancestor, they were like fish in water as they rushed through the chaotic fog. Their speed was extremely fast. Unknowingly, an hour had passed. The first hall master's speed was still faster than Ji Tianqing's and finally caught up with him. Without any superfluous words, the first hall master raised his hand and used the heavenly desolation judgment when the distance between the two was reduced to about 1,000 miles. Although the first hall master of the upper realm of the God Emperor had mastered more than 2,000 types of laws and was proficient in thousands of divine powers and secret skills, he had countless ultimate skills. However, as the saying goes, a single skill can conquer the world. He had very few opportunities to use it, but he loved this heavenly desolation judgment very much. It was very powerful and had a sacred feeling of replacing the heavenly Tao to eradicate evil. Ji Tianqing was helpless. The first hall master's strength and realm suppressed him. It was completely unreasonable. One heavenly desolation judgment was enough to force him to use all his strength. Above the dark sky, boundless golden light appeared and locked onto his aura, making it impossible for him to escape. Since he could not escape or take it head-on, he could only use the old method to resolve it. Sword of Annihilation. Ji Tianqing once again drew on the power of the world and waved the burial of heaven with all his might, slashing out a giant sword that was 10,000 feet long. There was no doubt about the result. The Sword of Annihilation and the Heavenly Desolation Judgment collided in the night sky. There was a loud explosion and millions of golden light fragments exploded. Ji Tianqing was sent flying again. Blood spurted out of his 7 orifices as he rolled and smashed into the surface of the chaotic sea. Chapter 46-41. The first hallmaster's attack was domineering and unreasonable. Another heavenly desolation judgment came down. Not only was Ji Tianqing sent flying, but he also spurted blood from his 7 orifices as his body shattered. When he fell from the sky and smashed into the chaos sea, his tall and burly body shattered into more than 30 pieces on the spot. That was because the divine body's endurance had reached its limit. That was why it was shattered by the impact. After all, he was using Su Juechen's body. It was already very difficult for an 8th-level Divine King divine body to last until now before it shattered. After his body shattered, Ji Tianqing's divinity flew out. It passed through the huge waves of the Chaos Sea and sped toward the south. In order to get away from the first hallmaster temporarily, he had no choice but to exhaust a huge amount of divine power to use the so close, yet worlds apart technique again. Swoosh! With a flash of divine light, Ji Tianqing teleported 100,000 miles away, distancing himself from the first hallmaster. The first hallmaster had just retrieved his scepter when he saw Ji Tianqing being smashed into pieces by the heavenly desolation judgment and falling into the chaos sea. He was feeling smug. He originally thought that Ji Tianqing was definitely going to die this time. However, he did not expect that Ji Tianqing's divinity would be safe and sound even though his injuries were so severe. He actually escaped again. Damn it! The first Hallmaster shouted angrily. He had no choice but to continue chasing with his scepter. The third Hallmaster and the fourth Hallmaster were slightly slower. They followed closely behind the first Hallmaster for 20,000 miles before they sped up. As for Kuan Sha and the Scorpion Ancestor, they were still 40,000 miles away. They hid in the chaos fog and chased relentlessly. Ji Tianqing's divinity quickly returned to his original body after escaping for more than 100,000 miles. His divine body had been hiding in the Sword of Burial of Heaven. Now that the divinity returned to his body, he returned to his original appearance. A handsome and heroic appearance, a sacred and mysterious temperament, a hidden expert's aura. Compared to his appearance when he possessed Su Juechen, the current him looked more like a god emperor. Ji Tianqing didn't show himself. He hid in the world of the burial of heaven and used his mind to control the burial of heaven. He cut through the night sky and sped south. Compared to the god-slaying battleship, the Sword of Burial of Heaven was much faster. After all, the Sword of Burial of Heaven was a genuine Emperor-grade artifact. Both parties continued to chase in the depths of the Chaos Sea. They flew south. As time passed, the distance between them decreased. Even though the flying speed of the Burial of Heaven was very fast, the first Hallmaster's strength was outstanding. His speed was always one step ahead of Ji Tianqing. A day later, the great Hallmaster caught up with the Sword of the Burial of Heaven. He waved his scepter again and used all of his power to chop out two giant axes that could split the sky and earth. The giant golden axes that were hundreds of thousands of feet tall attacked the Sword of the Burial of Heaven from both sides, erupting with incomparable power that made one tremble in fear. Before the golden axes landed, the chaos fog had already surged. A huge gap was torn open in the dark night sky, and a huge ravine appeared on the surface of the Chaos Sea. The Sword of the Burial of Heaven's aura was locked. There was nowhere to hide, and it was impossible to dodge. Although the first Hallmaster's divine ability was not as dazzling as the Heavenly Wasteland Judgment, its power was not weak at all. Moreover, the first Hallmaster did it on purpose to target Ji Tianqing. If he continued to use the Heavenly Wasteland Judgment, there was a 90% chance that Ji Tianqing would use the world-destroying sword again to cancel it out. However, he had slashed out two giant golden axes. Even if Ji Tianqing used the world-destroying sword again, he might not be able to cancel out the two giant golden axes. He would definitely be hit by one of the giant golden axes. At the critical moment, Ji Tianqing had to make a decisive choice. Should he resist passively or take the initiative to resolve it? The Sword of the Burial of Heaven was an Emperor-level divine artifact. It should be able to block the two giant golden axes, but it would be damaged to a certain extent. As for the extent of the damage, Ji Tianqing was not sure. He was not willing to do anything that he was not confident in. The Sword of the Burial of Heaven was the only Emperor-level divine artifact that he currently possessed. It could not be easily damaged. Therefore, he did not hesitate to take the initiative to meet the attack and resolve the first Hallmaster's attack. Swoosh! With a flash of white light, Ji Tianqing appeared above the Chaos Sea. He held the Sword of the Burial of Heaven tightly with both hands and instantly used two ultimate sword techniques. Blade of Spacetime. Sword of Daytime. On the left, a huge blazing white blade of light broke through the dark night sky and struck a giant golden axe. A cold light appeared on the right and instantly expanded to a radius of 50 kilometers. Like a resplendent golden sun, it swallowed the giant golden axe. Ji Tianqing did not use his trump card, the Sword of Annihilation. However, he had stimulated his potential and unleashed 120% of his strength. The power of these two ultimate skills was also very shocking. Boom! Boom! Crack! In the next moment, a deafening explosion erupted, resounding through the clouds. The blade of spacetime was shattered by the giant golden axe. The huge golden sun was also pierced through and shattered into golden fragments. However, the two giant golden axes also dimmed, and their power was weakened by 70 to 80%. Even if the giant golden axe hit Ji Tianqing again, he used the sword of the burial of heaven to block it. He only suffered some minor injuries and took the opportunity to retreat tens of thousands of kilometers away. Swish! Ji Tianqing once again used his ultimate skill, so close, yet worlds apart, and teleported another 100,000 miles away from the Grand Hall Master. Just like that, the first Hall Master furiously chased after him again. 2 days later, the first Hall Master once again caught up with Ji Tianqing, who was fleeing on his sword, and attacked him again. Ji Tianqing used his ultimate skill again, blocking and dispelling the attack with all his might. He managed to escape unscathed. For days later, the same scene played out again. 7 days later. As time passed day by day, Ji Tianqing and the first Hallmaster's divine power was greatly depleted, and their strength was declining. Of course, the first Hallmaster was unscathed, but Ji Tianqing's injuries were worsening. Although he was only lightly injured every time, he could not recuperate or recover his divine power during the chase. In the long run, he would be seriously injured and killed by the first Hallmaster before he could escape the Chaos Sea. Both parties could foresee this situation. The first Hallmaster was full of anticipation, but Ji Tianqing was full of anxiety and worry. Finally, after half a month of chasing and fighting, the situation took a turn for the better. In the vast and boundless Chaos Sea, there was a huge whirlpool with a radius of 50,000 kilometers. It was like a bottomless abyss. When Ji Tianqing flew past this place, the first Hallmaster caught up with him and attacked him. He was already covered in wounds and looked miserable. His strength had also decreased to about 70%. After using the Sword of Destruction, he barely managed to dissolve the first Hallmaster's attack. However, he was sent flying by the aftershock and crashed into the huge whirlpool. The bottomless abyss-like whirlpool contained too many dangers, and one had to be on guard. Under normal circumstances, Ji Tianqing would definitely ignore his injuries and try his best to stay away from the whirlpool to prevent himself from being swallowed. The first Hallmaster also thought so. He took the opportunity to chase him to the edge of the whirlpool and waited for him to fall into the trap. However, no one expected that not only did Ji Tianqing not resist the whirlpool's devouring, but he even accelerated and rushed in. Chapter 46-42. Swoosh! A dazzling golden light flashed, and Ji Tianqing's figure plunged into the dark vortex and quickly disappeared. It was as if he was swallowed by the vortex after being severely injured and unable to resist the vortex's devouring power. Standing at the edge of the vortex and holding the holy scepter, the Lord Hallmaster was dumbfounded. He had calculated and predicted several escape routes Ji Tianqing could take, but he did not expect that Ji Tianqing would be swallowed by the vortex. As a result, his subsequent plans fell through. Looking down at the bottomless abyss under his feet, his expression was very complicated. He was shocked, angry, and a little regretful. Damn it! That damn bastard, he would rather be swallowed by the Chaos Sea than fall into my hands. In fact, the Lord Hallmaster's mentality had changed during the half a month of chasing Ji Tianqing. He was no longer as angry as before, and could not wait to kill Ji Tianqing. Through half a month of chasing and competing, he had long seen that this young foreign god emperor was stronger and more talented than the Shura god emperor. If the four great temples deduction was not wrong, the ancient prophecy would come true. The Lord Hallmaster firmly believed that this handsome foreign god emperor was more like the person they were looking for, the chosen one. In fact, the Lord Hallmaster had quietly changed his mind. He did not intend to kill all of them. Instead, he intended to injure and capture Ji Tianqing, and then subdue him for the Shangqing Divine Palace. Anyway, everyone was still in the Chaos Sea, so they were not in a hurry to return to the Shangqing Temple. He would take Ji Tianqing and rush to the Evernight Sea again to try to ignite the eternal fire and open the gate of heavenly Tao. Unfortunately, as Ji Tianqing fell into the bottomless abyss, all of this went down the drain. The Lord Hallmaster would never jump into the bottomless abyss to track and capture Ji Tianqing. After all, this bottomless abyss with a radius of 50,000 miles in front of him was one of the most dangerous traps in the Chaos Sea. No one knew where the abyss led to or what dangers were hidden inside. In any case, from ancient times until now, none of the experts swallowed by the abyss had survived. The Lord Palace Master cherished his life more than anyone else, so why would he risk his life? A moment later, the third Palace Master and the fourth Palace Master arrived one after another. They also stopped at the edge of the bottomless abyss, not daring to take another step forward. The two Temple Masters stared at the abyss beneath their feet. After exchanging a glance, they looked at each other in dismay and shock filled their eyes. That God Emperor was devoured by the abyss just like that. Although that fellow was heavily injured, he shouldn't have been swallowed by the vortex. First Hall Master, could it be that your attack just now was too powerful, causing him to be severely injured and lose the ability to move? The two Temple Masters also found it inconceivable. At the same time, they felt a little regretful that Ji Tianqing had been swallowed by the abyss. In the past half a month, the two of them had basically been chasing after the Lord Hallmaster and Ji Tianqing. They had almost no chance to make a move. However, they had clearly seen every fight between the Lord Palace Master and Ji Tianqing. At first, they were also furious and couldn't wait to kill Ji Tianqing to avenge the Azura God Emperor. However, as the Lord Palace Master and Ji Tianqing fought again and again, they saw Ji Tianqing's valiant strength and endless trump cards. With his strength at the initial stage of the God Emperor, he could erupt with such terrifying fighting strength. Being chased by the Lord Palace Master, who was an upper stage God Emperor, and still being able to survive for half a month. What kind of shocking fighting strength was this? The third Palace Master and the fourth Palace Master were also shocked and gradually changed their views. They also privately discussed that Ji Tianqing was much stronger than the Azura God Emperor. If the four great temples' guess was right, and there really was a heaven's chosen one, then Ji Tianqing was more likely than anyone else. The two Temple Masters had also sent voice transmissions to the Lord Palace Master, reminding him not to accidentally kill Ji Tianqing. It would be best if they could capture Ji Tianqing and then go to the Evernight Sea region to try again. But now, the two Temple Masters' expectations and fantasies were dashed. The three Temple Masters stared blankly at the abyss and were silent for a long time. After 10 breaths, the Lord Palace Master said, "Although I didn't show mercy, with his strength, it's impossible for me to seriously injure him and make him lose his ability to resist. He threw himself into the abyss in order to escape our pursuit." The fourth Palace Master frowned and said in a low voice, "Doesn't he know how dangerous this vortex is and that being swallowed by the vortex is certain death?" The third Palace Master shook his head and said calmly, "From ancient times until now, almost all those who were swallowed by the vortex died. But don't forget, only God Kings can be swallowed by the vortex, and no God Emperor has ever been swallowed by the vortex. Therefore, God Emperor level experts might not necessarily die if they were swallowed by the vortex, and there might be a chance of survival. But he thought that he would die if he fell into our hands. So, he chose the lesser of two evils and would rather be swallowed by the vortex to fight for a chance of survival." The fourth Palace Master sighed helplessly and said with a bitter smile, "Sigh. If we knew he would be so unyielding, we would have negotiated with him and shown that we wouldn't kill him. Now that he has fallen into the bottomless abyss, we don't know if he's dead or alive, and where he'll end up. We've missed this God Emperor of a foreign race, and I'm afraid it's impossible to find another God chosen one who is more outstanding than him." The Lord Palace Master was more shrewd, and his state of mind was more stable. "Forget it, this person has fallen into the bottomless abyss, and we don't know if he's dead or alive. Let's end this matter here. We'll wait here for a few days, and when the fifth Palace Master arrives, we'll return to the temple. The Lord Palace Master said indifferently and turned to leave the edge of the vortex. Then, he took out the warship 10,000 miles away from the vortex and stepped into it. The third Palace Master and the fourth Palace Master sighed regretfully and turned to leave as well, returning to the warship. Next, the Lord Palace Master's warship hovered above the sea and waited for 6 days before the fifth Palace Master arrived. After the 4 Palace Masters met, the 4th Palace Master and the 5th Palace Master steered the warship and continued to fly south. The rest of the journey was peaceful, and they didn't encounter any more twists and turns or dangers. A month later, the warship left the chaotic sea and returned to land. 2 months later, the Lord Palace Master's warship returned to the Shang-Qin Mystery Realm in a very low-key manner. Before everyone arrived at the Mystery Realm, the second Palace Master and several elders who stayed behind to guard the Mystery Realm received a message in advance and knew the process and result of this operation. Therefore, when the Lord Palace Master's warship returned to the Mystery Realm, the second Palace Master did not arrange for anyone to welcome it. After all, the Shang-Qin Temple's operation this time failed. Not only did they fail to explore the mystery of the Gate of Heaven, but they also lost nearly 3,000 elites and suffered heavy casualties. When they set off, they had a fleet of 6 warships. Now, only 1 warship returned, and it was all alone. If they welcomed it with great fanfare, wouldn't it make the Palace Masters feel so embarrassed? Chapter 46-43. Ji Tianqing naturally knew that the huge vortex with a radius of 50,000 kilometers was very rare in the Chaos Sea. Its power must be terrifying. Even if he was a god emperor, his life would be in danger once he was swallowed by the bottomless abyss-like vortex. More importantly, he did not know where the huge vortex led to. After he was swallowed by the vortex, he did not know where he would be swept to. Perhaps he was still in the Chaos Sea, but on the other side. It was also possible that it led to the outer realm and sent him to a cold and desolate unknown area. He would wander in the void for countless years before returning to the origin planet. The most likely possibility was that after he was swallowed by the vortex, the Chaos Sea would suck out his cultivation and divine power. His divine body and divine spark would be minced into pieces and he would die. Although Ji Tianqing knew the consequences of entering the bottomless abyss, he still chose to jump in without hesitation. He had indeed successfully escaped the pursuit of the Lord Hall Master. However, he was not at his wits' end. Instead, he made that choice at the critical moment because he was confident. He did not understand the Chaos Sea thoroughly enough and did not know what was hidden in the bottomless abyss. However, before he chose to enter the bottomless abyss, he was at a critical moment of life and death. He had a sudden impulse like back then and had an epiphany. It was as if a voice was guiding him and making him take the initiative to enter the vortex. There was clearly no sound in his mind, but some messy images flashed through his mind. Those messy images were basically related to the Chaos Sea and the Sea Beast race. Through the dozens of messy images, Ji Tianqing captured 2 important pieces of information. Firstly, the Chaos Sea was the source of the origin planet and the entire universe. It was the most mysterious and unfathomable, but it also contained great opportunities. Secondly, the Sea Beast race that lived in the Chaos Sea was the oldest intelligent life form in the world and also the guardian of the heavenly Tao door. When Ji Tianqing summarized these 2 important pieces of information from the messy images, he immediately understood that this was a revelation from the heavenly Tao. Although the second piece of information did not seem to have anything to do with him entering the vortex. However, he believed that the heavenly Tao would not remind him for no reason. At the very least, the first piece of information gave him more confidence that his life would not be in danger even if he crawled into the abyss-like vortex. It was precisely because of the sudden revelation from the heavenly Tao that Ji Tianqing made such a decisive decision. Shua. When Ji Tianqing entered the bottomless abyss, all he could see was darkness. He could only feel his body descending rapidly. He was engulfed by the powerful devouring force, and his body fell uncontrollably into the deepest part of the abyss, as if he had fallen into boundless darkness. Thinking of the unknown danger he was about to face, he was powerless to break free from the devouring of the abyss. He could only use all his power to condense a shield to protect himself. Boom! A moment later, he fell into boundless darkness. It was unknown what he crashed into, but there was a muffled sound. It was as if he had crashed into a turbulent torrent, or perhaps he had broken through a spatial barrier. The tremendous recoil caused Ji Tianqing's shield to flicker with a golden light and shatter on the spot. His head was also dizzy, and his eyes were seeing stars. He couldn't see the things around him clearly. He didn't know how long he had drifted in the darkness. Suddenly, he saw a faint wisp of light in a distant area in front of him. He used the last of his strength, struggled to break free from the powerful devouring force, and flew towards that faint wisp of light. Crack! A moment later, another crisp shattering sound rang out. Ji Tianqing seemed to have broken through a spatial barrier and finally escaped the shackles of darkness. However, his injuries were too severe, and his consciousness and strength were too exhausted. His consciousness was muddled, and he gradually fell into a coma. The whistling wind and the surging torrent around him were getting farther and farther away until they disappeared. He had temporarily fainted and was unconscious. An unknown amount of time passed. Perhaps it was a day, or perhaps a month. Ji Tianqing, who was in a coma, gradually regained consciousness and woke up. Before he could see the situation around him, his first reaction was pain. It was as if his entire body was pierced by needles and twisted by knives. It felt as if a ceramic bowl had been broken, then pasted and pieced back together. He even suspected that his divine body had been broken before, and his divine bones had been broken before. When he tried his best to open his eyes, he gradually saw the situation around him. The surroundings were endless darkness, completely filled with seawater. He could vaguely see some black shadows of rocks and mountain ranges. They were layered and rose and fell. He was lying in a low-lying valley. Around him were undulating black reefs and a few ancient stone tablets. Under him was a flat ground made of more than 10 black and brown stone slabs. Some twisted patterns could vaguely be seen on the stone slabs, forming strange patterns. Ji Tianqing understood that he had not been brought to the outer realm by the vortex. He was still in the Chaos Sea. However, he did not know where he had drifted to. He was actually lying in this valley at the bottom of the sea. He looked around and did not see any sea beasts. Ji Tianqing stretched his limbs and carefully observed the black and brown stone slabs under him. He could see that these black and brown stone slabs were not naturally formed. They had been polished and carved. Although the shape of the stone slabs was not very regular, they were relatively flat. After the edges were polished, they could barely be considered square. As for the twisted patterns on the stone slabs, they must have been carved. When a few stone slabs were pieced together, the patterns could form a pattern. It was also invisibly absorbing the power of the Chaos Sea, emitting a dim light. This should be the masterpiece of those sea beasts, right? Ji Tianqing muttered to himself as he sat down cross-legged and began to circulate his energy to check on his injuries. Before he fell into the bottomless abyss, he was already seriously injured. Now that his injuries had worsened, and his strength was even weaker, his combat strength had decreased greatly. In my current state, if I meet the temple masters of the Shangqing temple again, I will have no chance to escape and will be killed by them. Fortunately, I don't know where I am. The temple masters of the Shangqing temple should not be able to find me. Ji Tianqing thought as he checked his injuries. There was silence all around. After he finished checking his injuries, he took out a few divine elixirs and swallowed them to temporarily suppress his injuries. He was planning to find a place to hide after figuring out the surrounding situation and enter the Jiutian Tenju Tower to heal his injuries. After his injuries were healed, he would pass through the Chaos Sea and return to land. However, at this moment, not far behind the black and brown mountain range, two huge black shadows swam over quietly. Ji Tianqing's first reaction was that there were sea beasts attacking. However, he found that the two huge sea beasts seemed to be hesitant and fearful. Moreover, he sensed that the two sea beasts only had the strength of an upper divine king, so he let down his guard. Chapter 46-44. Ji Tianqing pretended not to notice the approach of the two sea beasts. He continued to sit cross-legged on the stone slab and assumed a posture of channeling his energy. The two sea beasts moved forward hesitantly. Seeing that there was no reaction from him, they became bolder. One of the sea beasts looked like a dark purple electric eel. The other sea beast was a ferocious-looking bony fish with a dozen spikes all over its body. This was a bloodline passed down from ancient times. As the electric eel and bony fish approached Ji Tianqing, they did not forget to secretly communicate with each other. I clearly sensed that the foreign being had woken up. Why is he not moving? Can't you see that his injuries are very serious? Look at him sitting there motionless. He must be healing his injuries. So this is how the foreign being heals. But he is too careless. He didn't even look at where he is. How dare he heal his injuries here? He. So what if he is healing his injuries here? Do you dare to kill him and eat him? I don't dare. I still want to live for tens of thousands of years. It's strange. That foreign being has clearly fainted from his injuries. How can he still have such a powerful aura? Who knows? Anyway, he is a powerful being that we can't afford to offend. The further we stay away from him, the better. It's okay. We can't afford to offend him. The two lords will definitely have a way. We just need to keep an eye on him. When the two lords come, we will let them deal with him. After the electric eel and bony fish finished their discussion, they also timidly came to Ji Tianqing's side. The two of them did not dare to get too close to Ji Tianqing. They stopped 10,000 feet away from him and looked at him with shifty eyes. At this time, Ji Tianqing had already sensed the fluctuation of their divine sense and guessed what they were secretly discussing. Therefore, he released a beam of divine golden light at lightning speed and sealed off an area of 1,000 miles. Swoosh! An oval-shaped golden light shield instantly covered an area of 1,000 miles. Not only did it cover the bottom of the sea, but it also trapped the two sea beasts. The electric eel and bony fish suddenly panicked and trembled in fear. They hurriedly turned around and ran away. However, the golden light barrier released a huge amount of pressure, suppressing the two of them and preventing them from moving. Ji Tianqing also released his God Emperor's aura, which enveloped the two of them, causing them to go limp. They could only lean against the reefs and tremble. Spare me. Senior, please spare my life. Senior, please calm down. We didn't mean to offend you. Please don't kill us. The two sea beasts were so scared that they shivered and begged for mercy. Ji Tianqing saw that the two of them were really scared out of their wits and were not feigning civility, so he could see the clues. Therefore, he temporarily put away his powerful aura and waved at the electric eel and bony fish. The electric eel and bony fish dared not hesitate. Hurriedly crawling in front of him. Lying on the reef team 1,000 feet away from him. Senior. What orders do you have? But please be frank. Senior. What can I do for you? Anything we can do. It is my duty to do so. Ji Tianqing frowned. He felt that the scene before him was a little comical. The other party was clearly a sea beast and not the same kind as him. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were enemies. Yet, the other party was so respectful to him. He did not know if they were really frightened or if there was another reason. But these questions. Ji Tianqing's thoughts were useless even if he thought alone. He could only ask them. Tell me, where is this place? Who are you? The two sea beasts looked at each other. They did not dare to hide anything. They hurriedly replied, Senior, this is the territory of the Xianbing overlords and the Zijian overlords. Where are you currently? It's called the Black Rock region. We've been living here for tens of thousands of years. Overlords Xianbing overlords and Zijian overlords. Ji Tianqing frowned and thought to himself, in the Chaos Sea, it seems that only those ancient creatures at the God Emperor realm are called overlords. The overlords in the area closer to the land are the Blue Dragon and Yubingxin. The overlords in the area closer to the Evernight Sea region seem to be called Kun Sha and Scorpion Ancestor. Only the two ancient creatures in the middle of the sea region do not know their names. If I'm not wrong, the two ancient creatures that chased after the Azura God Emperor seem to be them. Thinking about it, Ji Tianqing had seen the Xianbing overlords and the Zijian overlords. The two sides had indirectly cooperated and worked together to kill the Azura God Emperor. Ji Tianqing pointed at the dark brown stone slabs under him and asked, "What's with these stone slabs?" The electric eel and bone fish looked at the stone slabs and hurriedly explained, "Senior, that's an array formation that we figured out ourselves. It can gather the surrounding divine power to help us cultivate. Senior, when you appeared in the Black Rock region previously, you landed in a canyon thousands of kilometers away. We were the ones who found you and spent a lot of time and effort to move you here. We only thought that by letting you lie here, you might wake up faster." While the two of them were answering, Ji Tianqing stared at them and sensed their spiritual fluctuations to determine if they were telling the truth. It turned out that the two of them were not lying. Ji Tianqing frowned again and asked in a deep voice, "You are from the sea beast race, and I am from a foreign race. According to what I know, the sea beast race has always rejected foreign races and hated the desolate race even more. When you found me, I was in a coma. You would have definitely killed me. How could you move me here to heal me?" He still found it illogical. The two sea beasts' behavior was somewhat abnormal. Both the electric eel and the bony fish were stuck, unable to say anything. Seeing their strange expressions, Ji Tianqing's face turned gloomy. He released a wisp of pressure and enveloped them. "Speak. Why are you doing this? What are your intentions?" The electric eel and bone fish were shocked by Ji Tianqing's pressure and trembled in fear. Their eyes darted around as they anxiously considered how to answer. Ji Tianqing's analysis was right. Their behavior was indeed abnormal. But there were some things they did not dare to say. Seeing the two of them filled with fear but still unwilling to speak, Ji Tianqing threatened them again, "Speak quickly. If you don't speak, I will kill you now. When the time comes, I will refine your soul memories and naturally know the answer." The electric eel and bone fish knew that this was a piece of cake for Ji Tianqing. The two of them trembled in fear and did not dare to hide anything. They answered truthfully, "Senior, please calm down. Don't kill us." "That's right. When we found you, you were seriously injured and unconscious. We did think of killing you, but there was a mysterious force protecting you that made it difficult for us to approach you. Furthermore, when we had the thought of killing you, there would always be a divine existence that would send down an invisible thought to warn us. If we dared to attack you, that divine existence would first turn us into ashes." Chapter 46-45. Divine Existence. Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a moment. He pointed above his head and asked in a deep voice, "Are you talking about that?" The electric eel and bony fish subconsciously looked up and then nodded in a hurry. Yes, it's exactly what you think." Ji Tianqing was now sure that the divine existence that the electric eel and bony fish were talking about was the heavenly axiom. He couldn't help but fall into deep thought. The heavenly axiom guided me and gave me inspiration and enlightenment when I was in a life and death situation. Now that I'm seriously injured and in a coma, the heavenly axiom sent down a mysterious force to protect me. These two sea beasts wanted to kill me but were warned by the heavenly axiom. No matter how you look at it, I'm more like the chosen one that the four great temples are looking for. Thinking of this, he thought of another question and asked the electric eel and bony fish, as the sea beasts, do you have any beliefs or believe in anything? For example, the ancestors of the sea beasts or the sea god. The electric eel and bony fish looked at each other and shook their heads, indicating that they didn't have such beliefs. Ji Tianqing didn't believe them and asked again, if you don't have any beliefs and haven't been enlightened, then you should have no taboos. Why are you afraid of the heavenly axiom? The electric eel and bony fish answered naturally, because the heavenly axiom is really supreme and terrifying. If we go against the will of the heavenly axiom, just a divine thunder will kill us. The two sea beasts answered honestly and it was indeed the truth. However, Ji Tianqing wasn't satisfied with this answer. Ji Tianqing remembered that when the ancient creatures of the God-Emperor realm besieged the Shangqing Temple, they said that the powerhouses of the Shangqing Temple had entered the Chaos Sea several times in the past 30,000 years. Every time the people of the Shangqing Temple entered the Chaos Sea, those ancient creatures would lead a large number of sea beasts out to intercept and kill the people of the Shangqing Temple. Logically speaking, the people of the Shangqing Temple were only exploring the Chaos Sea and studying the gate of the heavenly axiom in the Evernight Sea. They had never killed the sea beasts. There was no need for the sea beasts to fight to the death with the people of the Shangqing Divine Palace. Therefore, Ji Tianqing felt that the sea beasts must have some kind of mission or mission. Therefore, he tried to interrogate the two sea beasts in a roundabout way. He even resorted to coercion and bribery. The electric eel and the bony fish were scared half to death. They answered a series of questions in fear, but they did not say anything. In the end, they were forced by Ji Tianqing into a corner and had no choice but to use the Xianbing Overlord and the Zidian Overlord. Senior, we're just two insignificant minions in the Black Rock region. We don't know the secret you're talking about. Senior, Xianbing Lord and Zidian Lord will be here soon. Why don't you ask them? The two sea beasts were forced into a corner, and only then did they use the two lords as shields. However, when Ji Tianqing heard this, he immediately narrowed his eyes. A terrifying cold light shot out from his eyes. You've already informed Xianbing Lord and Zidian Lord? They'll be here soon. Obviously, when he was seriously injured and unconscious, the two sea beasts had already reported the news to the two lords. The two sea beasts suddenly became alert and realized that they had said something wrong. They were so frightened that their expressions changed drastically, and they trembled in fear. Senior, please spare our lives. It's our negligence, but we definitely mean no harm. Don't kill us. The two sea beasts trembled in fear and knelt on the ground, kowtowing and begging for mercy. In fact, from their conversation with Ji Tianqing, it was revealed that they had made two mistakes. Firstly, when they discovered Ji Tianqing, who was seriously injured and unconscious, they were filled with murderous intent and thought of killing him. Secondly, when they discovered that Ji Tianqing was protected by the power of the heavenly axiom, they reported the situation to Xianbing Lord and Zidian Lord. These two incidents revealed that they wanted to kill Ji Tianqing. Therefore, when Ji Tianqing killed the two of them, they only had themselves to blame. However, every living creature had the desire to live. Of course, the two sea beasts did not want to die, so they could only desperately beg for mercy. Even though they knew that the chances of Ji Tianqing forgiving them were very slim. Ji Tianqing had already raised his right hand and was ready to kill the electric eel and bony fish with one strike. Even though he was seriously injured, it was not difficult for him to do so. However, after he raised his hand, it froze for a moment before he retracted it. Scram, don't let me see you again. He shouted coldly with an expressionless face. He waved his hand and cast a divine seal to retract the golden light shield that sealed the two sea beasts. After the electric eel and bony fish regained their freedom, they did not dare to stay any longer. They hurriedly kowtowed to Ji Tianqing and thanked him a few times. Then, they turned and fled as fast as they could. Although they did not know why Ji Tianqing suddenly changed his mind and was willing to let them live, they did not want to know why. However, they didn't want to pursue the answer. They were afraid that Ji Tianqing would change his mind and kill them with a wave of his hand. After the electric eel and bony fish escaped, Ji Tianqing did not stay any longer. The Xianbing Lord and Zidian Lord were about to arrive. Maybe in 2 hours, or maybe in 10 breaths. If he was in his peak condition, he would not be afraid of the Xianbing Lord and Zidian Lord. No matter how powerful those two ancient creatures were, they could not be more terrifying than the Lord Hallmaster of the Shangqing Temple. However, it was a pity that Ji Tianqing was severely injured now, and his strength had decreased greatly. If the Xianbing Lord and Zidian Lord surrounded him and both sides started a fierce battle, he would not have any chance of winning. Therefore, it was better to leave first. It was best to escape. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing forced his severely injured body to turn into a stream of light and left the dark brown mountain range. He did not know how big the black lava region was or which region of the Chaos Sea it was located in. He only knew that he should fly south to stay away from the sea beasts and leave the Chaos Sea as soon as possible. However, it was a pity that his strength had decreased greatly, and his flying speed was also much slower. He had originally planned to use the Sword of Burial of Heaven to enter the Sword World and then use the Divine Sword to leave this region. However, at this moment, he sensed two powerful auras approaching quickly. 80,000 miles, 60,000 miles, 40,000 miles. With Ji Tianqing's keen observation skills, he immediately understood that those were two ancient creatures of the God Emperor realm. If he was not mistaken, it should be the Xianbing Lord and Zidian Lord who had arrived. Damn it! They actually came so quickly. Ji Tianqing was secretly anxious, but his aura had already been locked onto by the two ancient creatures of the God Emperor realm. He did not dare to act rashly. If he sped up and fled now, he would definitely be pursued by the Xianbing Lord and Zidian Lord. Moreover, the Xianbing Lord and Zidian Lord were in their peak condition. They were like fish in water in the Chaos Sea, and their speed was extremely fast. Even if he tried his best to escape, he would not be able to escape. Under such circumstances, Ji Tianqing decided not to escape. He put away the Sword of Burial of Heaven and stood there calmly. Chapter 46-46. Swoosh! Swoosh! Under Ji Tianqing's gaze, two beams of divine light flew towards him from afar. Just as he had sensed with his divine sense, the two ancient creatures were the God Emperor level sea beasts that he had seen before. The sea beast on the left was 3,000 feet long and looked like an octopus. Its entire body was icy blue, and its body was as huge as a mountain. It had thousands of tentacles of different lengths. It was one of the two lords of this area, Xianbing. The sea beast on the right was more than 2,000 feet long. Its entire body was purple with a hint of red. It looked like a lobster and a crab, and it had a pair of huge purple claws. The strange thing was that although it was a sea beast, it had 4 pairs of wide wings. The edges of the wings were covered with barbs. This sea beast with a hint of red was one of the two lords, Zidian. Xianbing and Zidian arrived at the scene. They stopped 100 miles away from Ji Tianqing and stared at him vigilantly. Who is that guy? Is he the severely injured and unconscious foreign race master that the locals mentioned? Judging from his aura, he should be an initial God Emperor. I don't know why, but I feel that his aura is a little familiar. Where have I seen it before? Xianbing and Zidian looked at Ji Tianqing and discussed telepathically. At this time, Ji Tianqing was in his original appearance. When he, Xianbing, and Zidian were hunting down the Azura God Emperor, he was in the appearance of Su Juechen. Therefore, Xian Bing and Zi Jian felt that his aura was familiar, but they could not recognize him. Strange, wasn't he seriously injured and unconscious? When did he wake up? Also, he sensed that we were coming, but he didn't run away in a panic. He even stood there calmly. Is he not worried that we would attack him? Isn't he too confident? Ji Tianxing appeared to be very calm and collected, which made Xian Bing and Zi Jian unable to make up their minds. They did not dare to act rashly. The two of them locked onto Ji Tianxing's aura and observed it carefully while continuing to discuss via telepathy. This guy is from a race that we've never seen before. He actually has the strength of a god emperor. How can he be a nobody? I guess he has nothing to do with the 4 great divine halls. Otherwise, he would have been famous a long time ago. We should also know him. Strange. Why would an alien god emperor come here? He's not even a member of the 4 great temples. It seems that only the people from the Shangqing temple have entered the Chaos Sea during this period of time. Even if this guy isn't from the Shangqing Divine Palace, it might have something to do with it. There's no point in us guessing here. Why don't I send a message to Blue Dragon, Yu Bingxin, Kuan Sha, and Scorpion Ancestor? Maybe they know. That makes sense. After the 2 sea beasts discussed their countermeasures, Xian Bing took out a communication jade slip and sent a message to the other 4 God Emperor Realm sea beasts. At this moment, Ji Tianxing saw that Xian Bing and Zi Jian had arrived. Why did they not speak? They did not intend to attack. He was about to turn around and leave. However, Xian Bing and Zi Jian had been locking onto his aura. As long as he made a single move, would he immediately teleport far away? They blocked Ji Tianxing's path. Swoosh! Swoosh! 2 divine lights flashed. Xian Bing and Zi Jian surrounded Ji Tianxing one after another. Ji Tianxing frowned secretly. He guessed that the other party would not let the matter rest. But he was also mentally prepared. He asked in a deep voice, "What? With just the 2 of you, you want to stop this emperor's footsteps?" Xian Bing and Zi Jian were not angry, nor did they show any killing intent. They sneered and said, "My friend from another race, don't forget that this is our territory. You came here without warning, so we should at least ask about it. Otherwise, you are too arrogant. 2 of our subordinates found you here, seriously injured and unconscious. There's something fishy about this matter. Please explain your identity and background clearly before you leave." Xian Bing and Zi Jian made it clear that they would not let Ji Tianxing leave. Whether Ji Tianxing exchanged words with them or fought with real weapons, Xian Bing and Zi Jian would not give up. Ji Tianxing understood this, so he could only be patient and deal with Xian Bing and Zi Jian. In order to stall for time, Zi Jian pretended to look around. After looking around, he asked, "My friend from another race, where are our 2 subordinates? Don't tell me you didn't see them. The place where you are unconscious is where they usually cultivate." Ji Tianxing did not have any grudges with the Sea Beast clan, so he did not want to become enemies. He answered honestly, "Before you came, I talked to them. However, I did not kill them. I let them go." Xian Bing and Zi Jian originally thought that Ji Tianxing would kill them to cover his tracks. They did not expect that he would let the 2 divine king realm sea beasts go. Xian Bing showed a skeptical look. He sneered and said, "You should know that such a cheap lie can be easily exposed. If you don't dare to admit what you have done, then it proves that there is something wrong with you." Before he could finish, Ji Tianxing said, "It's easy to prove. They haven't gone far. You should be able to call them back." Zi Jian took out a communication jade slip without hesitation and sent a message to the electric eel and bony fish. As expected. After a short while, Zi Jian received a reply from the electric eel and bony fish. The facts proved that Ji Tianxing was right. Therefore, Zidian ordered the electric eel and bony fish to return to where they were. He had some questions to ask them. While waiting, Xian Bing asked Ji Tianqing indirectly about his identity and background. However, Ji Tianqing did not reveal anything. Not long after, Xian Bing received a reply from the Blue Dragon in Kuan Sha. The Blue Dragon's reply was nothing special. However, Kuan Sha's reply made Xian Bing and Zi Dian's eyes light up. Kuan Sha told them that they had met a desolate god emperor a few days ago. His name was Su Juechen, and he was from the Shangqing Temple. However, Su Juechen had killed the Shangqing Temple's 6th Hall Master, so there was something wrong with his identity. Later, Kuan Sha and Scorpion Ancestor stopped Su Juechen and fought with him for a few hours. In the end, the 3 Hall Masters of the Shangqing Temple passed by, and the 1st Hall Master personally attacked Su Juechen. The two sides chased each other for 2 days. The 1st Hall Master was strong enough to destroy Su Juechen's divine body. Only then did everyone realize that the so-called Su Juechen was actually a fake. He was originally a black-haired, white-robed alien youth. He possessed Su Juechen and used Su Juechen's identity as a cover to sneak into the Shangqing Temple. Finally, the 1st Hall Master chased the white-robed youth and arrived near a huge whirlpool. In order to escape, the white-robed youth, who had nowhere to go, could only jump into the bottomless abyss and disappear. Kuan Sha and Scorpion Ancestor had been lurking in the dark and watched the whole thing, so they knew very well. After the white-robed youth disappeared, they thought that the matter had come to an end, so they quietly left. The 3 Hall Masters of the Shangqing Temple also left on the battleship. Black-haired, white-robed alien youth. Xian Bing put away the communication jade slip and stared at Ji Tianqing with a playful smile in his eyes. Chapter 46-47. Without a doubt, Ji Tianqing's identity had been exposed. The Lord Hallmaster of the Shangqing Temple had exposed his disguise and forced him to reveal his true identity. Kuan Sha and the Scorpion Ancestor were very wretched. They hid at the side and watched the whole process. Xian Bing and Zi Dian were neighbors with Kuan Sha and the Scorpion Ancestor. They were friends and kept in contact with each other. All they needed to do was to send a message and everything would be clear. After Xian Bing put away the communication jade slip, he looked at Ji Tianqing with a playful smile and said, as the saying goes, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Moreover, you have no grudges with the Sea Beast clan. Moreover, we have fought side by side before. Therefore, we should be able to talk openly and honestly. Ji Tianqing frowned and said expressionlessly, we have no grudges or connections. Therefore, there is nothing to talk about. Zi Dian grinned and said in a cold tone, although you have disguised yourself well, you were seriously injured and unconscious not long ago. I don't think you have recovered so quickly. We are very sincere and would like to know some things from you. We hope you can cooperate. Although Zi Dian did not say anything threatening, the Sea Beast clan was not kind. However, the Sea Beast clan had never been kind creatures. The threat in its words was obvious. Ji Tianqing was seriously injured and his combat strength had decreased greatly. However, he still had a trump card. Even if he really fought with Xian Bing and Zi Dian, he was confident that he could escape from this place. However, since Xian Bing and Zi Dian did not take the initiative to attack, he did not need to let things develop to that stage. After pondering for a moment, Ji Tianqing asked in a deep voice, "What do you want to ask?" Xian Bing and Zi Dian looked at each other. Seeing that he was willing to cooperate, they were obviously happy and expectant. Therefore, Xian Bing said first, "You may know that the Sea Beast clan was born in the Chaos Sea and grew up here. Heaven has given us more power, but it also restricts us. We can hardly leave the Chaos Sea. Otherwise, our power will decline and our lifespan will decrease rapidly. Therefore, we are curious about the affairs of the outside world. Even if we have some understanding of the desolate race and the 4 great temples on the continent, it is only through the people from those temples. Although Xian Bing and Zi Dian wanted to ask Ji Tianqing some questions, the first thing they did was to introduce themselves. This was also a sign of sincerity. It showed that it really wanted to communicate with Ji Tianqing and did not have any ulterior motives. After Ji Tianqing heard this, he thought to himself, so, it is not a legend that the sea beasts cannot leave the Chaos Sea. It is true. No wonder the sea beast race's strength had increased greatly in the Chaos Sea and was blessed by nature. Could it be that the Heavenly Tao was looking out for the sea beast clan? At the same time, the Heavenly Tao gave them restrictions or even missions. Thinking of this, he asked, previously, I asked 2 of your people, but they didn't know much. Since you are lords and ancient creatures that have lived for tens of thousands of years, I have a question that I would like to ask. Do you believe in or obey the Heavenly Tao? The Heavenly Tao has given you greater power, but it has also given you corresponding restrictions. Are there any missions? For example, guarding the Eternal Night Sea region? When this question was raised, Xian Bing and Zi Dian immediately became alert. Their eyes became much sharper. The 2 of them stared at Ji Tianqing at the same time, revealing a guarded look. Why are you asking these questions? Isn't this nonsense? Your Excellency, don't forget that we are the ones asking you questions, not the other way around. Ji Tianqing's expression was calm as he said, since you want to communicate with this emperor, then we should answer each other's questions. If you are the only ones allowed to ask questions and I am not allowed to, then I will refuse to communicate with you. On the surface, he was arguing with Xian Bing and Zi Dian, but in fact, he was secretly laughing. He had already seen through some clues. Xian Bing and Zi Dian had such a big reaction and showed such vigilance. It was enough to show that his guess was probably right. Perhaps in order to change the topic as soon as possible, Xian Bing asked in a deep voice, Tell me, where are you from? What grudge do you have with the Shangqing Temple? Why did you take over the body of a citizen of the Shangqing Temple, sneak into the Shangqing Temple team, and take the opportunity to assassinate the 6th Hall Master of the Shangqing Temple? Ji Tianqing answered naturally, My surname is long and my name is Tian. I come from an unknown place on the other side of the continent. I have nothing to do with the Shangqing Temple, nor do I have any grudges with them. The reason why I sneaked into the Shangqing Temple team and assassinated the 6th Hall Master was because I had a personal grudge with the 6th Hall Master. After answering, he sneered and asked, Why are you so interested in the affairs of the Shangqing Temple? Could it be that the grudge between you and the Shangqing Temple is fake? Of course not. Zi Dian immediately retorted and said with some agitation, Those bastards of the Shangqing Temple would break into the Chaos Sea every few days and try to explore the Evernight Sea. Over the years, we have fought countless times and many of our people have died in the sea. We are sworn enemies with the Shangqing Temple. Zi Dian took the initiative to mention the Evernight Sea. Even if it realized that something was wrong and changed the topic in time, Ji Tianqing still took the opportunity to ask, the Shangqing Temple entered the Chaos Sea just to explore the Evernight Sea and passed by your territory. They didn't kill your people. Why do you have to intercept them and fight them to the death? This. Purple Lightning was suddenly at a loss for words. His gaze was somewhat evasive, unwilling to look at Ji Tianqing. Xian Bing was also a little angry and glared at Zi Dian, as if blaming it for spilling the beans again. It could be seen that the sea beasts were uneducated. Even if they were ancient creatures that had lived for tens of thousands of years, they were not very scheming and shrewd. Seeing that Xian Bing and Zi Dian were silent, Ji Tianqing smiled and continued to ask, You wouldn't pay such a big price to stop the Shangqing Temple from exploring the Evernight Sea for no reason. So, there is only one explanation, and that is, you have been given some kind of mission, or some kind of mission. And the only one who can give you missions and missions is probably the Supreme Heavenly Way that created everything. Xianbing and Zidian suddenly opened their eyes wide and stared at Ji Tianqing with shock and vigilance. Although they didn't speak, the meaning in their eyes was clearly, "How did you know this secret?" The smile on Ji Tianqing's face grew wider, and he continued, "You can deny it, or you can refuse to answer. However, the two people under your command should be back soon. Later, you can ask them about the specific situation first, and then decide whether to answer or not." "What do you mean?" Xianbing and Zidian were a little confused and didn't know what he meant. At this time, the electric eel and the bonefish appeared in the sea not far away and swam over hesitantly. Xianbing and Zidian glanced at Ji Tianqing and then ordered the electric eel and the bonefish to come closer and ask them about the specific situation and what had happened before. Ji Tianqing looked at them calmly as they talked to each other and secretly circulated his energy to heal his injuries. Chapter 46-48. The electric eel and the bony fish were very afraid of Ji Tianqing. However, with the presence of Xianbing and Zidian, the two of them felt much more at ease. As for Xianbing and Zidian's questions, the two of them answered them without hesitation. They explained the cause and process of the incident clearly. Previously, when Ji Tianqing interrogated them, no matter how scared they were, they still held back when answering questions. However, when faced with Xianbing and Zidian, they did not hide anything and answered all of their questions. Xianbing and Zidian listened attentively and asked a few questions from time to time. They kept nodding and shaking their heads. Ji Tianqing did not interrupt them, nor did he interrupt them. He quietly treated his injuries. After a quarter of an hour, Xianbing and Zidian finished their questioning and let the electric eel and the bony fish leave. The two sea beasts hesitated for a moment. They seemed to be worried that Xianbing and Zidian would have a conflict with Ji Tianqing and that they would be punished by the heavenly Tao. However, the two of them had already told Xianbing and Zidian about this matter. They did not want to say anything more and could only turn around and leave. After the electric eel and the bony fish left, only Xianbing, Zidian, and Ji Tianqing were left in the dark underwater valley. The atmosphere became a little strange. Ji Tianqing looked at the two of them quietly. There was a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. It was hard to tell what he was thinking. Xianbing and Zidian's attitudes also changed. When they looked at Ji Tianqing again, they were not as confident and arrogant as before. Seeing that the two of them were unwilling to speak, Ji Tianqing took the initiative to say, "You know the cause and the details of the incident. Now, can you answer this emperor's question?" Of course, Xianbing and Zidian would not answer his question directly. Instead, they looked at him with a complicated gaze and asked, "What is your background? Why does the heavenly Tao want to protect you? The first race that the heavenly Tao favored and created was us, the sea beast race. You're just an outsider. How could you possibly be so favored by the heavenly Tao? The gate of heavenly Tao was the origin of all things. The sea beasts in the Chaos Sea were the earliest living beings to appear. This was the consensus of all living beings on the planet of origin. The sea beasts had always thought that they were the favored children of the heavenly Tao and were favored by the heavenly Tao. Even if they were trapped in the Chaos Sea, restrained, and even shouldered a sacred mission, it was still the glory of the sea beast race. But now, this notion seemed to be overturned. Xianbing and Zidian's feelings were very complicated. They couldn't accept this result in a short time, so they couldn't wait to know Ji Tianqing's real identity. Ji Tianqing smiled and said, "You probably know one thing. For the past tens of thousands of years, the four great shrines have been looking for the so-called Heaven's Chosen One. Unfortunately, they couldn't find him no matter how hard they searched. And this emperor should be the one they are looking for." "What? That's impossible." Xianbing and Zidian were stunned. They widened their eyes in shock and looked at Ji Tianqing in disbelief. Of course, They knew that in the past 30,000 years, the four great shrines would often enter the Chaos Sea to explore the Evernight Sea region. They also knew that the four great shrines had been looking for the Heaven's Chosen One, hoping that the Heaven's Chosen One could help them solve some secret. But they didn't know what the so-called Heaven's Chosen One meant or what the conditions were. They could only understand it literally. It probably meant that the person chosen by the Heavenly Tao had some special relationship with the Heavenly Tao. So far, it seemed that Ji Tianqing was protected by the Heavenly Tao. The two sea beasts wanted to kill him, but they were warned by the Heavenly Tao. Although it was just an illusory thought, and no one had evidence to prove that it was the will of the Heavenly Tao. Moreover, no one knew what the Heavenly Tao was, and no one had ever seen it. But the sea beasts were the first creatures created by the Heavenly Tao, and they were also one of the Heavenly Tao's favorites. Of course, they had the right to speak. Xian Bing and Zi Dian asked about the situation, and they didn't doubt the electric eel and bonefish's words. The scene fell silent again. Xian Bing and Zi Dian looked at Ji Tianqing in a daze, not knowing what to say. Ji Tianqing didn't rush them. He knew that they were shocked and needed some time to digest this shocking news. After a long while, when Xian Bing and Zi Dian came back to their senses, he said, "This emperor has already revealed his identity and origin, and has shown his sincerity. If you still don't tell me, then there's no need for us to continue talking." Since he was protected by the Heavenly Tao, and the sea beasts believed and feared the Heavenly Tao, he didn't have to worry about anything. If they could talk, then they could talk. If they couldn't, then he could leave calmly. He believed that the sea beasts wouldn't dare to stop him. But Xian Bing didn't give up. He said, "Even if you might be the one chosen by the four great temples, how can you prove it?" Ji Tianqing looked at him and said with a smile, "Your two subjects have already verified it. If you don't believe me, you can try." In fact, he wasn't sure if the Heavenly Tao would warn Xian Bing and Zi Dian after they tried to kill him. But he was extremely confident and sure. Xian Bing and Zi Dian were hesitant and didn't dare to try. The electric eel and bonefish were small fries. After they tried, they received a warning from the Heavenly Tao. They were God-Emperor powerhouses, and they dreamed of immortality. If they were warned by the Heavenly Tao, it wouldn't be good. If the Heavenly Tao remembered this, wouldn't they have no hope of immortality in this lifetime? Zi Dian looked very conflicted. After hesitating for a while, he said, "But you still haven't told us where you came from." Ji Tianqing frowned and said, "I've already said that I came from an unknown place on the other side of the continent. Even if I tell you in detail where I cultivate and which mountain I built my cave abode on, how can you tell if it's true or not? You haven't even left the Chaos Sea, so you haven't seen land." Purple Lightning was momentarily at a loss for words. Ji Tianqing was a little impatient. His face gradually turned cold. He said in a low voice, "I'll give you one last chance. Are you going to tell us or not? If you don't want to answer, then we don't have to waste our breath." Seeing that he was angry and could leave at any time, Xian Bing and Zi Dian could only dispel their worries and quickly answer. "Fine, I admit it." Xian Bing sighed dejectedly and said, "You guessed right. We sea beasts do believe in the Heavenly Tao because we're the first creatures created by the Heavenly Tao. We're also the most blessed race." Zi Dian continued to explain, "Although the Heavenly Tao gave us special talents and greater power, it also gave us more restrictions. Just as you said, the Heavenly Tao has indeed given us the mission to protect the Chaos Sea and the Evernight Sea region." Xian Bing and Zi Dian finally admitted it. This proved that Ji Tianqing's guess was correct. At the same time, it also explained why the sea beasts would stop the people from the four sacred halls from entering the Chaos Sea at all costs. But once the sacred hall experts entered the Evernight Sea region, the sea beasts disappeared without a trace. Chapter 46-49. Why don't the sea beasts dare to enter the Evernight Sea region? Is this also the will of the heavenly Tao? Ji Tianqing was very curious about this question. He felt that this question was also very important, so he asked directly. The sea beasts were not as cunning as the desolate race. In comparison, they were easier to get along with. It was easier to solve the problem by directly asking. Xian Bing and Zi Dian had already confessed their identity, mission. Naturally, they would not refuse to answer this question. Yes, the Evernight Sea region is a forbidden area. No living beings can go near it. There are the most dangerous traps and forces there. Some reckless people once entered the sea region, but they were turned into ashes before they could go far. Zi Dian nodded and explained to Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and thought to himself, the Evernight Sea region is too dangerous. This is only part of the reason. The most important reason is the restriction of the will of the heavenly Tao. The center of the Evernight Sea region is where the door of the heavenly Tao is. The will of the heavenly Tao restricts the sea beasts like this to protect itself. It prevents the living beings of the world from prying into the mystery of the heavenly Tao. All his previous doubts were now answered. Ji Tianqing had more guesses and deductions. After pondering for a moment, he saw that Xian Bing and Zi Dian were silent. He tried to ask, since you bear the mission given by the heavenly Tao, you can be considered the guardians of the heavenly Tao. And I am the chosen one. Perhaps only I can solve the mystery of eternal life. Shouldn't you assist me in exploring the Evernight Sea region? Ji Tianqing only mentioned the Evernight Sea region and did not mention the door of the heavenly Tao. This was because he knew that the sea beasts did not dare to enter the Evernight Sea region. They might not know about the door of the heavenly Tao. But his question made Xian Bing and Zi Dian's expressions change greatly. They quickly shook their heads. No. Absolutely not. We can be called the guardians of the heavenly Tao. But you, the chosen one, have yet to be verified. Moreover, our mission is to protect the Chaos Sea and the Evernight Sea region from prying eyes. Even you can't barge into the Evernight Sea, otherwise we'll. Fortunately, Xian Bing and Zi Dian did not transform into their human forms. Otherwise, they would definitely shake their heads and wave their hands. However, Zi Dian stopped halfway through her sentence. Ji Tianqing looked at it with a playful smile and teased, why don't you continue? Otherwise, what would happen? Are you going to attack me? Zi Dian was very conflicted. She secretly sent a voice transmission to Xian Bing, saying, this is not right. Our mission is to guard the Evernight Sea region and not allow any creatures to spy on us. However, he was the chosen one and was protected by the heavenly Tao. If he were to charge into the Evernight Sea region and we were to stop him, wouldn't we be warned by the heavenly Tao? Wasn't this contradictory? What should we do? Xian Bing naturally couldn't answer such a contradictory question. He could only reply via voice transmission, it's just a hypothesis. He didn't really barge into the Evernight Sea region. When he enters the Evernight Sea region, we'll see what happens then. That's the only way. Thus, Xian Bing and Zi Dian stopped worrying about this problem. The two of them looked at Ji Tianqing seriously and said in a serious tone, Long Tian, we can't answer this question for the time being, but we definitely won't agree to it. The only thing we can do is to allow you to move about in the Chaos Sea. This is already the biggest concession we can make. In your current state, we advise you not to think about charging into the Evernight Sea region. In addition, we will inform Blue Dragon, Yu Bingxin, Kuan Sha, and the Scorpion Ancestor about your situation and let them know about it. We advise you to leave the Chaos Sea as soon as possible and not stay here. Ji Tianqing smiled and said, I'm currently seriously injured and can't travel. As the chosen one, it's fine if you don't take care of me, but you're actually chasing me away. Heh heh, it seems like you have limited respect for the heavenly Tao and don't remember the mission given by the heavenly Tao. You're talking nonsense. How can you spout such nonsense? Zidian and Xianbing were shocked and angry and hurriedly stopped him. Their respect for the heavenly Tao came from the depths of their souls and was innate. It was as if the heavenly Tao had written their worship and respect for the heavenly Tao into their blood when it created the Sea Beast clan and passed it down from generation to generation. Therefore, Ji Tianqing's words caused them to be extremely alarmed. In addition to their panic, Xianbing and Zidian's attitude also changed. They only wanted to leave this place as soon as possible and didn't want to see Ji Tianqing again. They had a premonition that if they continued to tangle with Ji Tianqing, they might fall into his trap and become his accomplices or subordinates. Since you haven't recovered from your injuries, you can recuperate wherever you want. It's fine as long as you don't enter the Evernight Sea region. We will order the people of the Black Rock region not to disturb you. You must leave as soon as possible after your injuries have healed. After saying these two sentences, Xianbing and Zidian turned around and left. They didn't want to stay for a moment longer. Looking at their figures leaving in a hurry, Ji Tianqing's lips curled into a playful smile. During this trip to the Chaos Sea, he was hunted down by the Lord Hallmaster and lost the cover of Su Juechen's identity. His original body was also severely injured. However, he killed the Azura God Emperor and took revenge. He also saw the Evernight Sea region and the Gate of Heavenly Tao. More importantly, he had a deeper understanding of the Chaos Sea, the Sea Beast clan, and the Heavenly Tao. Although he couldn't subdue Xianbing and Zidian, he couldn't make the Sea Beast clan work for him either. However, he had interacted with the Sea Beast clan. When he came to the Chaos Sea in the future, he would be able to travel freely. When he succeeded in his revenge in the future, he would be more confident when he came to explore the Gate of Heavenly Tao. After a long time, Ji Tianqing confirmed that Xianbing and Zidian had left. Only then did he return to the top of the underwater mountain range. He released his divine sense to explore the surrounding terrain, looking for a place where the divine power of heaven and earth was denser. In less than 15 minutes, he found a place where the divine power was denser. It was in a pitch-black trench that was hundreds of thousands of feet deep. Thus, he dived into the black trench and entered the dark brown rock wall. He cast a simple spell and set up a defensive array. Then, he took out the Jiutian 10 Absolutes Pagoda and entered the distorted spacetime to heal his injuries. When he started to heal in the distorted spacetime, everything in the outside world returned to normal. The dark brown rock wall returned to normal. There was nothing strange about it. The small Emperor-level array formation with a radius of 100 feet also covered all traces and auras. Apart from the God Emperor, no one could discover the Jiutian 10 Absolutes Pagoda. Not long after, the hundreds of thousands of sea beasts in the Black Rock region received strict orders from their overlord. All the sea beasts had to retreat to the edge of the Black Rock region and leave the central area empty. They were not allowed to approach. The sea beasts didn't understand the reason and were full of doubts. However, they still obeyed the order and migrated to the edge of the region. Only the electric eel and bonefish vaguely guessed the reason. However, they had to keep their mouths shut and didn't dare to leak the news. Chapter 4650. Time passed day after day. The Chaos Sea gradually calmed down, and the storm caused by the Shangqing Temple's intrusion gradually subsided. The 6 God Emperor realm ancient creatures of the 3 seas also returned to their lairs. The elite sea beasts under their command also returned to their bases and returned to their peaceful lives. If nothing unexpected happened, the Chaos Sea would be peaceful for many years to come. Until many years later, when the experts of the 4 temples intruded into the Chaos Sea again, the God Emperor realm lords would gather their armies again to stop and kill them. In comparison, the wars and killings on the planet of origin were indeed much less. At least, there had never been a large-scale war between the four temples on land. There had never been a war between the overlords of the Chaos Sea. Furthermore, they maintained a good relationship. Overall, the planet of origin was relatively peaceful and peaceful. Ji Tianqing stayed in the distorted spacetime of the Jiutian Ten Absolutes Pagoda, healing his injuries in seclusion. His injuries were very serious. No matter how strong his recovery ability was, no matter how many elixirs he took, it would still take hundreds of years to fully recover. When his injuries were completely healed and he ended his seclusion, a full 100 years had passed in the distorted spacetime, and 2 years had passed in the outside world. In these 2 years, the Jiutian Ten Absolutes Pagoda was hidden in the rock walls of the Dark Trench, and it was not discovered by any creatures. The 600,000 sea beasts in the entire Black Rock region also obediently guarded the edge of the Black Rock region, not daring to approach the central region. Originally, after Ji Tianqing's injuries were healed, he should have left the Black Rock region, crossed half of the Chaos Sea, and returned to land. But he did not leave the distorted spacetime, and continued to cultivate in seclusion to condense the third Taoist rhyme. Before killing the Azura God Emperor, his third Taoist rhyme was already more than half completed. After killing the Azura God Emperor, he refined the Azura God Emperor's divinity fragment, and obtained a huge amount of divine power and many divine Tao laws. Now, he was in seclusion to heal his injuries for another 100 years. After his injuries were healed, his strength and foundation had improved further. Of course, he had to take this opportunity to condense the third Taoist rhyme and greatly improve his strength. Time passed quietly. Ji Tianqing was immersed in his cultivation. He had no distractions and his strength continued to grow. A month in the outside world meant that he had been cultivating in the distorted spacetime for 50 months, which was more than 4 years. Finally, his third Taoist rhyme was successfully condensed. The 5-colored Taoist rhyme circled around his body for 3 days before it disappeared into his body. However, he still did not end his secluded cultivation. He was still absorbing the divine power of heaven and earth, consuming a huge amount of divine stones and cultivation resources to continue improving his strength. The blood flame sacred tree beside him had also grown to 90,000 feet tall and was burning with blood-red flames. Over the years, the blood flame sacred tree had continued to grow. In particular, during the battle between Shangqing Divine Palace and the Sea Beasts tribe, a large number of king gods had died in battle. As a god-king level blood flame sacred tree, it continued to devour the blood, qi, and soul essence left behind by the god kings. Its strength increased rapidly. Now, the blood flame sacred tree had also reached the pinnacle of the god-king level and was growing towards the god-emperor level. After all, Ji Tianqing had killed the Azura God Emperor. The blood flame sacred tree had absorbed the blood, qi, and soul essence of the God Emperor and obtained great benefits. It was because of the fall of the Azura God Emperor that the blood flame sacred tree had the opportunity to break through to the God Emperor level. However, Ji Tianqing had observed the blood flame sacred tree and could confirm that it was unable to break through for the time being. Unless he killed 1 or 2 more God Emperor powerhouses and allowed the blood flame sacred tree to devour more blood, qi, and soul essence, then it would be able to break through to the God Emperor level. Unknowingly, another 100 years had passed in the distorted spacetime. The blood flame sacred tree was still burning with blood-red flames. Its strength continued to expand, but it was still unable to break through to the God Emperor level. Everyone who had been cultivating in seclusion under the sacred tree had more or less benefited from it. Among them, the Prajna God Emperor had benefited the least. She was already a God Emperor powerhouse. Before the blood flame sacred tree broke through to the God Emperor level, she could only absorb some divine power and would not receive much help. However, Ji Wuhan, Ji Wushuang, Xian Yu, Black Dragon, Zhen Hong, Lin Shui, Chao Qingyu, and Yank had benefited the most. For so many years, everyone had been cultivating in seclusion under the blood flame sacred tree. They had endless cultivation resources and could continuously absorb the power of the blood flame sacred tree. Their strength had increased steadily. Now, only a few people were still stuck at the mid-level God-King level. Most of them had become high-level God-Kings. As for Yun Yao and Ji Ku, they had been stuck at the pinnacle of the God-King level for many years, unable to break through. Helpless, they could only imitate Ji Tianqing's actions. That was to continue cultivating in seclusion and continuously strengthen themselves. They had already strengthened themselves to more than 20 times the strength of ordinary pinnacle God-Kings. Unfortunately, they could not obtain a fortuitous opportunity like Ji Tianqing's and were unable to break through to the God-Emperor level. Many years ago, Ji Tianqing had also thought of a way to impart the heaven-punishing divine art that he had created to Yun Yao and Ji Ku. After he reached the God-Emperor level, he had a new understanding of the heaven-punishing divine art and created an even more profound 7th-level cultivation technique. However, after Yun Yao and Ji Ku cultivated the heaven-punishing divine art, they could only break through the limits of a pinnacle God-King and continuously strengthen themselves. They still could not break through to the God-Emperor level. Perhaps, they had to strengthen themselves to 99 times the strength of a pinnacle God-King before they could naturally become a God-Emperor. Time flew by. Under the quiet chaos sea, new sea beasts were born every day. Countless sea beasts also increased their strength and reached a higher realm. Another 3 years passed. The hundreds of thousands of sea beasts in the Black Rock region had been waiting at the border for 5 years. In these 5 years, many sea beasts had left their nests in cultivation grounds. The speed at which their strength increased had obviously decreased. In the first few years, the hundreds of thousands of sea beasts could still remember the orders of the 2 overlords and did not dare to approach the central region of the Black Rock region. However, in the 5th year, many sea beasts became anxious and impatient. They began to discuss why the 2 overlords had asked them to leave their nests and not approach the central region. The sea beasts could not come to a conclusion and wanted to return to their nests and cultivation grounds. Thus, after repeated discussions, they decided to send a message to the 2 overlords, Xian Bing and Zi Dian, requesting to return to their nests. Xian Bing and Zi Dian received many requests from their citizens and were also hesitant. They did not know if Ji Tianqing was still in the Black Rock region or how much his injuries had healed. According to their estimates, Ji Tianqing would need at least 100 years to recover from his injuries. However, the sea beasts of the Black Rock region were already impatient after waiting for 5 years. How could they wait for another 100 years? After thinking about it, Xian Bing and Zi Dian could only agree to the request of the sea beasts and allow them to return to their nests and cultivation grounds. In their opinion, Ji Tianqing might have already left the Black Rock region. Even if he did not leave, with his God-Emperor level strength, it was unlikely that he would be disturbed by the sea beasts. Chapter 46-51. In fact, Xian Bing and Zi Dian's thoughts made sense. Even when hundreds of thousands of sea beasts returned to their homes and territories, they did not disturb Ji Tianqing. Almost all of the sea beasts were kept in the dark. They did not know that there was a foreign god-emperor hiding in the middle of the Black Rock region. Only the electric eel and bony fish knew the inside story, and they were very nervous. After returning to the middle of the Black Rock region, the 2 of them rushed back to the underwater mountain range and secretly investigated the nest and the cultivation ground that was pieced together with a few stone slabs. They were trembling with fear. They were extremely cautious and fearful, afraid that Ji Tianqing was still recovering there. Once they were discovered by Ji Tianqing, they would be frightened and intimidated like last time. However, when the 2 of them approached carefully, they found that the underwater mountain range was empty. There was also no one on the simple array laid out by a few stone slabs. Where is that foreign god-emperor? Did he leave long ago? Who knows? We'd better be careful. The electric eel and bony fish looked around and discussed telepathically. They were obviously relieved, and there was a hint of relief in their tone. Then, the two of them searched the surrounding area within 100,000 miles. They even checked the trench and did not find any trace of Ji Tianqing. Then, the electric eel and bony fish were really relieved. They returned to the underwater mountain range and began to cultivate. They thought that Ji Tianqing had left and that the terrifying nightmare was finally over. Their lives finally returned to normal. However, 20 years later, an unforeseen event occurred. Ji Tianqing had been cultivating in seclusion under the blood flame's sacred tree in the distorted spacetime. After condensing the third Taoist rhyme, his strength was still increasing. He gradually reached the peak of the God Emperor initial stage. He began to integrate the hundreds of new laws and tried to condense the fourth Taoist rhyme. During the long years of cultivation, not only did he cultivate the heaven-punishing divine art and derive more advanced cultivation techniques, but he also integrated the third Taoist rhyme to strengthen his own divine powers. As his strength increased, so did his overall combat prowess. He was getting closer and closer to the middle level of God Emperor. In the process of cultivation, he discovered a problem. They were both cultivating in seclusion in the distorted spacetime. However, there were still some differences between cultivating on the continent of the Star of Origin and cultivating in the Chaos Sea. On the surface, the continent of the Star of Origin was richer in cultivation resources, and the divine power of heaven and earth was abundant. However, in reality, the Chaos Sea was the origin of all things. It was the place with the densest divine power and the richest cultivation resources. If he cultivated in seclusion in the Chaos Sea, he could absorb more divine power. The speed at which his strength increased was faster than on land. However, this was only a very small problem. However, after Ji Tianqing discovered this problem, he continued to ponder and ponder, gradually coming up with an answer. The reason why the land and the Chaos Sea had two different effects was because of the distance between them and the heavenly Tao door. Since the heavenly Tao created everything in the world, including everything in the universe, then the source of all power was the heavenly Tao. The heavenly Tao door was located in the depths of the Chaos Sea. If he stayed in the Chaos Sea, he could naturally absorb more divine power and sense more heavenly Tao power and aura. Because of this, Ji Tianqing decided to cultivate in seclusion in the Chaos Sea for a long time. He wanted to absorb more heavenly Tao power and condense the Tao runes as soon as possible. Similarly, Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the others had the same feeling when they were cultivating in seclusion. They could absorb more divine power and sense the power of the heavenly Tao more clearly. Their strength increased faster. 20 years had passed in the outside world. Meanwhile, Ji Tianqing and everyone around him had cultivated in seclusion in the distorted spacetime for 1,000 years. This should be the longest time Ji Tianqing had cultivated in seclusion. Of course, the results of this seclusion were also remarkable and delightful. Not only had he condensed the fourth Tao rune and successfully reached the middle level of the God Emperor, but he had also deduced the eighth level of the heaven-punishing divine art. The various mystical abilities and ultimate skills that he had mastered in the past had also been strengthened and perfected. They now possessed more power and more effects. Apart from that, he also took a lot of time to help Yun Yao and Ji Ku. He hoped that they could break through to the God Emperor stage as soon as possible. In the beginning, no matter how much he planned and personally helped, he could only help Yun Yao and Ji Ku strengthen their strength. He could not break through. Thus, he could only calm down and think about how to solve this problem. He knew that it was very difficult to break through to the godly monarch stage. It required extremely high talent. Breaking through to the God Emperor stage was 100 times or 1,000 times more difficult. 99% of godly monarchs would never be able to break through to the God Emperor stage in their lifetime. Not only did it require aptitude and talent, but it also required fortuitous opportunities related to the heavenly Tao. The heaven-punishing divine art that Ji Tianqing had created was one of the fortuitous opportunities related to the heavenly Tao. However, when he broke through to the God-Emperor stage, he did not rely on the heaven-punishing divine art. Instead, he returned the five elements world to its original position and allowed the three great eternal worlds to coexist. This filled the gap in the heavenly Tao. Therefore, Yun Yao and Ji Ku could only cultivate the heaven-punishing divine art. They could not break through quickly. Ji Tianqing thought of the first half of one of the two supreme treasures, the eternal heavenly book. More than 1,000 years ago, the five great godly monarchs had fought with him for these two supreme treasures. He had obtained the heaven-punishing formation while the five great godly monarchs had obtained the eternal heavenly book. After that, the five great godly monarchs comprehended the eternal heavenly book and broke through to the God-Emperor stage one after another. This proved that the eternal heavenly book could lead one to the God-Emperor stage. He felt that Yun Yao and Ji Ku's aptitude was not much worse than the five great godly monarchs. Since the five great godly monarchs could reach the God-Emperor stage, Yun Yao and Ji Ku could do it too. Therefore, he began to search the Azura God-Emperor's divine soul memories. Previously, when he refined the Azura God-Emperor's Godhead fragment, not only did he absorb the divine Tao laws and divine power, but he also refined the Azura God-Emperor's memories. In the Azura God-Emperor's memories, there was a part of the eternal heavenly book's contents. After Ji Tianqing carefully comprehended and sensed it, he felt that part of the contents was not comprehensive enough. That was only a part of the eternal heavenly book's contents. It was definitely not the whole thing. Therefore, he went to consult Pan Ruo God Emperor. Ever since Pan Ruo God Emperor entered the distorted spacetime, she had been cultivating in seclusion under the blood flame's sacred tree without stopping. After cultivating in seclusion in the distorted spacetime for more than 1,200 years, not only did she recover from her injuries and return to her peak, but she also condensed her fourth Taoist rhyme and reached the middle stage of the God-Emperor stage. Thinking back, after the five great godly monarchs surrounded and killed Kenshin, Pan Ruo broke through to the God-Emperor stage in less than 100 years. Now, 1,000 years had passed in the world, and she had reached the middle stage of the God-Emperor stage. Such a breakthrough speed was already world-shocking. However, compared to Ji Tianqing, this was nothing. Ji Tianqing cultivated from a mortal to the middle stage of the God-Emperor stage in just over 200 years. No matter which plane or heaven he was in, he was the one and only person in history. Chapter 46-52. Ji Tianqing asked the Prajna God Emperor about the eternal heavenly book. At that time, the two of them had just broken through to the middle level of the God Emperor. After meeting, the Prajna God Emperor looked at Ji Tianqing with a complicated expression. There was shock, envy, and some admiration. She was even more convinced that Ji Tianqing was the chosen one that the various temples were looking for. Only those who were chosen by the heavens would have such monstrous aptitudes and such an unparalleled speed of advancement. Ji Tianqing didn't chat with her and went straight to the point to explain his intentions. Previously, I killed the Azura God Emperor in the depths of the Chaos Sea and refined his godhead. I also obtained a portion of his soul memories. However, the eternal heavenly book in his memories is not complete. What's going on? Hearing his question, the Prajna God Emperor raised her eyebrows slightly. She thought for a moment and said indifferently, the eternal heavenly book is the upper part, and the heaven-punishing formation is the lower part. Even if you deny it, I have already confirmed that the heaven-punishing formation is in your hands. Since you have already obtained the heaven-punishing formation, why would you care about the eternal heavenly book? After all, no matter how unfathomable the eternal heavenly book is, it can't be compared to the heaven-punishing formation. At this point, she paused and looked sideways at Yun Yao and Ji Ku, who were cultivating under the blood flame sacred tree. Therefore, you asked me about the eternal heavenly book because you want to help your two wives break through to the God Emperor realm as soon as possible. After all, the five of us broke through to the God Emperor realm by comprehending the eternal heavenly book. Although the Prajna God Emperor had exposed him, Ji Tianqing did not feel embarrassed. He nodded slightly and said, "With your intelligence, it's not difficult for you to guess this. Yes, I am interested in studying the eternal heavenly book, but it's not that urgent. The reason why I came to you is to help them break through to the God Emperor realm." The Prajna God Emperor was still expressionless. He said coldly, "The eternal heavenly scripture is my greatest trump card, just like the heaven extermination formation is your greatest trump card. Although we are allies and partners, I have no obligation to tell you the contents of the eternal heavenly tome. Unless you can take out something of equivalent value or offer an equivalent condition, I refuse to cooperate in this matter." Clearly, the Prajna God Emperor was not willing to take out his final trump card and support to help Ji Tianqing for no reason. Ji Tianqing was not angry. With a gentle expression, he persuaded, "Perhaps in your opinion, you had no choice. He was threatened by me and forced to form an alliance with me. But in fact, I've already treated you as a friend. Otherwise, how could Qi Xia have been able to cultivate until now and even recover her divine body? How did you get here? Cultivate with my family and friends?" Prajna God Emperor could not deny these things. She did not dare to look straight into Ji Tianqing's sincere eyes. She was afraid that she would agree in a moment of weakness. She tilted her head slightly and looked at the distorted space in the distance. With an indifferent expression, she said, "I'm no longer the naive and childish girl from back then. I won't be moved by your goodwill. You're moved by a little bit of kindness. Let's talk about conditions." Ji Tianqing had already made up his mind to gain something without risking anything. There was no way he would talk about conditions with her. After all, he could not take out any conditions that could make an equivalent exchange with the Prajna God Emperor. Something that could be equivalent to the eternal heavenly scripture. It could only be the heaven extermination formation. But could he share the heaven extermination divine art with his wife and children? But he could not give it to the Prajna God Emperor. So, he raised his eyebrows and made a somewhat shameless decision. He looked at the Prajna God Emperor with a gentle gaze. He slowly reached out his hands and cupped the Prajna God Emperor's cheeks. He turned the Prajna God Emperor to look at him. The Prajna God Emperor did not expect such an intimate action. She was stunned on the spot. Her body stiffened as she sat on the spot. Her eyes widened as she stared at Ji Tianqing. She even forgot to resist. Whether it was more than 1,000 years ago or now, since the day she met Kenshin, the two of them had never had such intimate contact. Even if Ji Tianqing only cupped her cheeks with both hands and did nothing else. But this was beyond her expectations and imagination. Her breathing and heart stopped as if she had been petrified. Ji Tianqing's expression did not change. His expression was still gentle as he said, "I don't want to threaten you anymore. But you and I both know that on this planet of origin, you have no one to rely on other than me. The Azura God Emperor has fallen. Your alliance with the other 3 God Emperors has long been in name only. And among the 4 temples, the Kongming Temple and Shangqin Temple have been tricked. You can't rely on them. The other 2 temples also have other God Emperors in contact with them. You have no chance." Ji Tianqing moved the Prajna God Emperor with emotion and reason. He analyzed her situation thoroughly. But, the Prajna God Emperor did not listen to a single word. She just stared blankly at Ji Tianqing. Her mind was blank. Her body stiffened and her cheeks uncontrollably turned red. Even if she was a peerless goddess, a supreme being, a God Emperor, the softest part of her heart was like that of a young girl. Their fragile defense line was broken just like that. "You, let go of me." When Ji Tianqing finished analyzing her situation, she finally sobered up. She hurriedly lowered her voice and shouted in a cold tone. She was embarrassed and angry, but there was still some excitement in the depths of her heart. However, she could only pretend to be cold on the surface. Ji Tianqing turned a deaf ear to her words. He still held her face and continued, I can make friends with the beasts on land, and I can also get closer to the sea beasts in the Chaos Sea. I can even rely on any temple to control power and ask for what I want. But you know very well that that's not my best choice. Among so many temples and God-Emperor powerhouses, you are the only one I can trust. Therefore, we should be honest with each other. The Prajna God-Emperor looked cold on the surface, but in fact, she was embarrassed and anxious. She glanced at the other side of the blood-flame sacred tree from time to time, afraid that Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the others would see her. She was like a guilty thief. Under such circumstances, she did not have the mood to listen to Ji Tianqing's heartfelt words. She could only lower her voice and shout coldly, let go of me. Your wife, children, and friends are all here. Aren't you afraid that they will see you? In fact, she had also thought of struggling to break free from Ji Tianqing's palms. However, the two of them were both God-Emperor. If they really fought, there would definitely be strong divine power fluctuations. It would be easier to alarm Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the others. There was another reason that she could not say. This was actually the first time she had felt the temperature of Kenshin's palm. No matter how much she resisted on the surface, the trace of obsession in the depths of her soul still had some attachment and dependence. She even felt gratified and excited. This was probably what they often said, your mouth says no, but your body is very honest. Chapter 46-53. Not only did Ji Tianqing analyze Pan Ruo God-Emperor's situation, but he also tried to persuade her earnestly. This was the so-called moving with emotion and reasoning. But Pan Ruo God-Emperor was full of anxiety and guilt. How could she listen? The conversation between the two of them was also evasive. You talk about your own things, and I talk about mine. However, the two of them had very different attitudes. Pan Ruo God-Emperor was ashamed and angry, anxious and guilty. Ji Tianqing, on the other hand, was calm and composed, as if victory was within his grasp. Even his appearance, as if he had Pan Ruo God-Emperor in his grasp, was somewhat shameless and tyrannical. Seeing that Pan Ruo God-Emperor was still unwilling to agree under such circumstances, he could only continue, Pan Ruo, I presume you also have confidence in me. I am the one chosen by the heavens. In the future, there is an extremely high possibility that I will open the door to the heavens and solve the mystery of eternal life. I can guarantee you that when the time comes, I will not take the mystery of eternal life for myself. I will definitely share it with my family and with you, and help you obtain eternal life. How about it? This is the condition I'm offering. In reality, if Pan Ruo God-Emperor was in a rational and calm state, she definitely would not agree to such an absurd condition. What kind of condition was this? You want to exchange it for the secret of the eternal heavenly book with an empty promise? Keep on dreaming. But Pan Ruo God-Emperor was ashamed and angry. She was already powerless to resist. She could only lower her voice and reply urgently, okay. I believe you. I promise you. Quickly let me go. Why are you so straightforward? This time, it was Ji Tianqing's turn to be stunned. Pan Ruo God-Emperor was not so easy to talk to just now. Why did she suddenly agree, and in such a hurry? He subconsciously glanced back, and only then did he realize where the problem lay. Yun Yao, Ji Ku, Ji Wuhan, Ji Wushuang, and the others did not move at all. They were still focused on cultivating in seclusion. Among the crowd, there was only one person who had a slight change in his cultivation posture. That was Yank. This fellow had been cultivating. At first glance, his hands were placed flat on his knees, and his 3 fingers were slightly curled. There was nothing unusual about him. However, Ji Tianqing could see that there was a slight change in the way he circulated his energy and cultivated. Previously, his thumb and index finger were clasped together, but now they were separated. This proved that Yank's cultivation had been interrupted, and he had changed his hand gestures and movements. No wonder Hanya agreed so quickly. It turns out that she sensed Yank's movements and was afraid of being discovered. Ji Tianqing immediately understood the reason and couldn't help but reveal a mocking smile. At this time, the Prajna God Emperor had already raised his arms to block Ji Tianqing's palms, and hurriedly retreated 3 steps back to maintain a certain distance from him. Even so, this was still not enough. Her face was frosty, and she glared at Ji Tianqing with a face full of shame and anger. Seeing that her anger had yet to subside, and the blush on her beautiful cheeks had yet to recede, Ji Tianqing smiled and said, "Calm down first. In a while, just write down everything you know about the eternal heavenly book and give it to me." The Prajna God Emperor wrinkled her willowy brows and cursed in a low voice, unable to calm down, "You're shameless. You're taking advantage of people's difficulties. I really don't dare believe that you would do such a thing. How did you become like this?" In her heart and understanding, Kenshin had always been a cold and arrogant gentleman, the world's #1 expert in the way of the sword, a male god whom she admired and respected. But the reborn Kenshin not only married and had children, he also knew how to use all kinds of schemes. The most infuriating thing was that he actually used such shameless methods to force her to submit. It was too subversive. Looking at the vigilant Prajna God Emperor with a cold expression, Ji Tianqing spread his hands and said with an innocent face, "I only spoke a few words that came from the bottom of my heart. How is that shameless? How is that taking advantage of other people's difficulties? You speak as if something happened between the two of us. Don't accuse me wrongly, I haven't done anything yet." The Prajna God Emperor was once again stupefied, as if she had been petrified. She looked at Ji Tianqing in disbelief. She simply couldn't believe that such ambiguous and shameless words actually came from the mouth of the other party. These words were too frivolous. How could he say such words to a pure and flawless woman? The Prajna God Emperor was very angry. She bit her lips and glared at Ji Tianqing with a cold expression. Her hands couldn't help but tremble. Seeing her so angry, Ji Tianqing didn't continue to provoke her. He changed the topic and explained in a gentle tone, "Don't misunderstand, I don't have any other intentions. I just treat you as a friend." The Prajna God Emperor coldly snorted and asked in return, "Then when you treat other friends, will you also flatter, and do that?" "Of course." Ji Tianqing nodded without hesitation and said in a serious tone, "Those who can cultivate here are all my family and friends. They are all worthy of my trust, the kind that I can entrust my life to. Everyone's actions are a bit more intimate, a sign of mutual concern and trust." The Prajna God Emperor looked around and looked at the experts around the sacred tree. She was still skeptical. "Humph, I don't believe you, unless you prove it to me." The topic was changed, and the Prajna God Emperor's shame and anger were greatly reduced. Ji Tianqing was a bit embarrassed. "How can I prove it? Everyone is cultivating in seclusion, I can't disturb them." "No. I saw it just now, that big guy has already finished his cultivation." The Prajna God Emperor's attitude was very stubborn, and she even pointed at Yank not far away. Yank, who was sitting cross-legged on the floating platform, seemed to be cultivating with his eyes closed, but for some reason, his fingers suddenly trembled twice. Ji Tianqing glanced at Yank, then turned back to the Prajna God Emperor and smiled bitterly, "That's a friend who has followed me for many years, risking his life for me many times. Do I still need to prove it? That's why I can prove that you weren't lying just now." The Prajna God Emperor said expressionlessly, as if saying that if you don't prove it to me, then you're lying. Ji Tianqing was very helpless, but he could only get up and leave, flying towards Yank. Sitting on the floating platform and cultivating, Yank's eyelids began to twitch, and his back began to sweat. But he still didn't move, closing his eyes and pretending to cultivate. It was very difficult to endure. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing flew in front of Yank, looking at his huge body that was several zhang tall, like a pile of rocks, and couldn't help but feel a headache. But the Prajna God Emperor was watching from not far away, so he could only continue to act. Yank, how's your cultivation going? Ji Tianqing calmly woke Yank up, expressing his concern with a concerned tone. Yank also stopped his cultivation and pretended that he had been awakened. After that, Ji Tianqing asked him a few questions, and he answered them all in a well-behaved manner. But he was very nervous, and couldn't help but transmit his voice to Ji Tianqing, "Young master, I really didn't see anything. Don't worry, I won't tell the two matriarchs." Ji Tianqing couldn't help but roll his eyes, and transmitted his voice back, "Since you don't know anything, what are you going to tell them?" Chapter 46-54. Yan Ku was stunned. He immediately realized that he had said something wrong. His eyes were filled with regret and he wished he could give himself 2 slaps. Seeing that he was anxious and wanted to explain further, Ji Tianqing was also afraid that he would make things worse, so he hurriedly sent a voice transmission to stop him. "Shut up. You've been cultivating in seclusion. You don't know anything. Do you understand?" Yank pursed his lips and didn't dare to say anything. He just nodded. His simple and honest appearance was comical, causing Pan-Ri Emperor God, who was not far away, to reveal a smile in his eyes. In fact, she had seen through Yank's disguise and guessed that Yank and Ji Tianqing were secretly communicating. The master and servant were putting on an act, but because of Yank's honesty, they looked funny. Ji Tianqing encouraged Yank a little more and patted Yank's broad shoulder. He was about to turn and leave. At this time, the Prajna God Emperor said to him, patting the shoulder, "And that's it? You weren't like that just now." Ji Tianqing, who was about to leave, suddenly froze. He could only smile bitterly in his heart. Damn Prajna. She must have done it on purpose. With that thought, Ji Tianqing looked at Yank's big head and wide cheeks. He looked at his own palm and couldn't bring himself to do it. Yank was also sweating. He looked at him in fear, and his eyes were full of pleading. Oh my God! That scene was chilling just thinking about it. But the Prajna God Emperor was eyeing covetously. Ji Tianqing could only grit his teeth. His hands lit up with golden light and condensed into a pair of millstone-sized palms. He slowly reached out to Yank's face. At this moment, Ji Tianqing's heart was in agony. He wanted to cry but had no tears. Yank was so frightened that he wanted to run away. His eyes were full of despair. Bang! Bang! Fortunately, Ji Tianqing was quick-witted. He didn't lift Yank's face with his golden palms. Instead, he patted his face. The golden palm collided with Yank's huge face, producing a few muffled sounds. Yank, cultivate well and strive to reach the peak of the God King realm as soon as possible. Ji Tianqing said this with a smile, expressing his encouragement to Yank. Yank could only try to squeeze out a smile that was uglier than crying and nodded hard. Ji Tianqing quickly retracted his palms and turned to leave without looking back. Now that he had completed his mission and verified his words with the Prajna God Emperor, he secretly let out a sigh of relief. Poor Yank, too, looked relieved. He quickly raised his arm to wipe his sweat. When Ji Tianqing returned to the Prajna God Emperor's side, he discovered that the Prajna God Emperor's anger had completely disappeared. She was pursing her lips, suppressing her laughter as she looked at him with a mocking gaze. The anger, embarrassment from before had all vanished. Ji Tianqing knew that she was doing it on purpose. He glared at her and snorted. "Humph, are you satisfied now? Do you believe me?" Seeing him finally admit defeat and look wronged, the Prajna God Emperor was in a good mood. She couldn't help but laugh. "You reap what you sow. Who told you to bully me?" This was the first time Ji Tianqing had seen the Prajna God Emperor smile since his rebirth. Just like before, her smile was as pure and flawless as a flower. The two of them fell into silence and did not speak. Seeing that Ji Tianqing was a little absent-minded, as if he had recalled some memories, the Prajna God Emperor quickly retracted her smile. She returned to her cold and aloof attitude. "All right, let's end this matter here. I'll give you what you want in a moment." With that, the Prajna God Emperor took out a jade slip and began to record the contents of the eternal heavenly scripture into it. Ji Tianqing also returned to normal. He stood on the floating platform with his hands behind his back and waited quietly. Not long after, the Prajna God Emperor recorded the contents of the eternal heavenly scripture and handed it to Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing received the jade slip and read its contents with his divine sense. Moments later, he retracted his divine sense and frowned. "Why is it only 600 words? The contents aren't complete." The contents of the eternal heavenly scripture that the Prajna God Emperor knew were different from the Asura God Emperor's, but they were both around 600 words long and profound. In response to Ji Tianqing's doubts, the Prajna God Emperor explained, "When we obtained the eternal heavenly scripture, there was also an internal conflict. Netherworld, Asura, Lu Jiuyang, and the others all wanted to keep the eternal heavenly scripture for everyone, but in reality, they wanted to keep it for themselves. However, after many years of competition and deadlock, everyone finally decided to divide the 3,000 words of the eternal heavenly scripture into 5 portions, one for each person. If we cultivated only one portion and were unable to break through to the God Emperor realm, we could exchange and obtain new portions. However, later on, we cultivated only 600 words of content and broke through to the God Emperor realm one after another. Thus, we didn't exchange. Everyone kept their secrets and kept the contents that belonged to them." After hearing the Prajna God Emperor's explanation, Ji Tianqing finally understood. So that's how it is. From this, it could be seen that the alliance between the 5 God Emperors had been very weak from the beginning. After all, the stronger God Emperors all had their own selfish motives. Since 600 words of content can help people break through to the God Emperor realm, then I've obtained 2 portions. They should be able to help Yao Yao and Kuku. With this thought in mind, Ji Tianqing put away the jade slips and thanked the Prajna God Emperor. Then, he recorded the 600 words of the heavenly scripture in the Asura God Emperor's memory on 2 jade slips. You probably haven't seen the contents of the heavenly scripture that the Asura God Emperor obtained. I'll leave one for you. You can study it. It might be helpful. Ji Tianqing took out a jade slip and gave it to the Prajna God Emperor before turning to leave. The Prajna God Emperor didn't say much. He took the jade slip and watched him leave before continuing to cultivate. Ji Tianqing didn't waste any time. He took the jade slips and went to find Yun Yao and Ji Ku. He woke up Yun Yao and Ji Ku, who were cultivating in seclusion, and handed the 2 jade slips to them. When Yun Yao and Ji Ku learned that the jade slips recorded the contents of the eternal heavenly scripture, they treated it very seriously and treated it like a treasure. The 2 of them cultivated the contents of the heavenly scripture of 600 words respectively. They carefully comprehended and thought about it, determined to break through to the God Emperor realm. After the 2 of them cultivated in seclusion, Ji Tianqing also continued to cultivate in seclusion. Just like that, more than 200 years passed in the distorted space-time. Yun Yao was the first to break through the limits of the Divine King realm and began to break through to the God Emperor realm. However, she failed 3 times. The reason was that the divine power in the distorted spacetime was not enough. Moreover, the grade of the Jiutian 10 Absolutes Pagoda was not high enough. If she forcefully broke through to the God Emperor realm in the distorted spacetime, the huge shock wave would also damage the internal structure of the divine pagoda. Hence, Yun Yao left the Jiutian 10 Absolutes Pagoda and appeared in the rock wall of the dark trench. Ji Tianqing had long dug out a cave with a radius of 100 feet on the extremely hard rock wall. It was also protected and covered by a thiar-clevel array formation. Yunyao continued to cultivate in the cave. She could clearly sense that there was endless divine power of heaven and earth surging over from all directions. The divine power at the bottom of the chaotic sea was far denser than the distorted space-time. Chapter 46-55. In the dark trench, not only was the divine power rich, but it was also closer to the heavenly Tao. Yunyao tried to break through to the God-Emperor level again, and she could feel the power of the heavenly Tao more clearly. She was like a whirlpool, crazily devouring the divine power of heaven and earth from all directions. Only when she had accumulated enough divine power could she break through the limit, integrate the precepts and comprehension of the heavenly Tao, and condense the Tao. During this process, with the dark trench as the center, the divine power of heaven and earth within a radius of hundreds of thousands of miles surged faster. The divine power of heaven and earth in all directions was attracted and rushed toward the trench. Farther away from the trench, the divine power of heaven and earth was not very obvious, and could only be sensed with divine sense. Within a radius of 100,000 miles from the trench, one could clearly see strands of five-colored divine power gathering from the surroundings, like billions of small streams converging into a river, rushing toward the trench. The dark seabed within a radius of 30,000 miles of the trench was filled with the five-colored divine light, and it became as bright as day, especially dazzling. The trench became the center of the whirlpool, like a bottomless pit, crazily devouring the divine power of heaven and earth. Yunyao was immersed in her cultivation, and she did not care about the changes in the outside world. However, the sea beasts around the trench were frightened by this sudden change. They never would have thought that the Black Rock region, which had been peaceful for 20 years, would suddenly have an overwhelming amount of five-colored divine light. That inconspicuous dark trench also became the center of the divine power gathering, like a whirlpool flickering with divine light. What had happened? Had a rare treasure appeared in the trench? Or had the space shattered, the barrier collapsed, and a black hole appeared? Within a radius of hundreds of thousands of miles, tens of thousands of sea beasts were terrified, and their hearts were filled with questions. And the ones who were the most frightened were naturally the electric eel and the bony fish. The two of them were closest to the trench, only a few hundred miles away. They were cultivating in seclusion when suddenly, they were drowned by the divine light. At that moment, the electric eel and the bony fish were scared out of their wits. They almost forcibly ended their cultivation and immediately jumped up. Fortunately, the endless five-colored divine light was not aggressive, and did not cause any damage to them. After the initial panic, the electric eel and the bony fish gradually calmed down. They began to search for the center of the five-colored divine light and tried to deduce the reason for its appearance. Thus, they soon found the dark trench that was thousands of miles long and tens of thousands of feet deep. Above the trench, the area within 30,000 miles was filled with the five-colored divine light, as if a five-colored sun had appeared at the bottom of the ocean. The surging five-colored divine light constantly washed over the bodies of the electric eel and the bony fish, causing them to tremble all over. Even if they did not take the initiative to absorb it, their bodies would be forcibly filled with endless divine power. They felt refreshed and energized. Their strength continued to rise, and so did their auras. Such a shocking scene caused them to be shocked, and they couldn't help but guess and fantasize about exactly what sort of treasure and what sort of expert was capable of causing such an intense vortex of divine energy. Perhaps only an emperor-grade divine artifact or a god emperor would be able to do that, right? The electric eel and the bonefish hesitated for a moment and discussed in private. Only then did they summon the courage to enter the trench and explore the final destination of the five-colored divine light. Bathed in dazzling divine light, they passed through the turbulent storm of divine light and entered the deepest part of the trench. In the end, they discovered that the massive amount of divine energy of heaven and earth had disappeared near a rock wall. However, they had no idea where the divine energy of heaven and earth had gone after entering the rock wall. The electric eel and the bonefish speculated that if this storm of divine energy was caused by some sort of treasure of heaven and earth, then the treasure would be hidden in the dark brown rock wall. As long as they could dig through the rock wall, they would be able to obtain the treasure, and that would be a huge gain. Both of them were middle-level divine kings, and if they could obtain a God-Emperor grade treasure of heaven and earth, they could quickly break through to high-level divine king, or even become a peak divine king. If they worked hard enough and had sufficient talent and comprehension, it was not impossible for them to break through to God-Emperor grade in a few years' time. With this thought in mind, the electric eel and the bonefish were very excited, and could not wait to release their divine senses to explore the rock wall. They were very familiar with this dark trench, and in the past tens of thousands of years, they had come here no less than 10 times. In their opinion, although the dark brown rock wall was tough, it was nothing to be afraid of. However, when they extended their divine senses, they could not penetrate the rock wall and investigate the situation inside the rock wall. What's going on? Our divine senses seem to be blocked by an invisible force. The electric eel and the bonefish looked at each other, and there was some doubt and seriousness in their eyes. It should be the power of a God-Emperor, or else we should be able to investigate. Looks like we guessed right, this rock wall is most likely hiding an Emperor-level treasure. But we have been here many times in the past, and we have never felt the aura of an Emperor-level divine object, nor did we see anything unusual. There's always a first time for everything. Maybe that treasure was not fully grown before. Alright, we'll believe you for now. We are the closest to this place, and also the first to discover the treasure here. We have to get the treasure as soon as possible, or other experts will come to snatch it, and we won't have a share. That's right. The birth of the treasure has caused such a huge commotion, I'm afraid the sea beasts within hundreds of thousands of miles have been alerted, and they will definitely come to check the situation. The electric eel and the bonefish discussed telepathically as they tried to find a way to investigate the situation inside the rock wall. Their divine senses could not penetrate the rock wall, so they released their divine power, trying to dig through the rock wall. However, there was always an invisible force protecting the rock wall, and even if they attacked with all their might, they would only be dissolved or even bounced off. Within 15 minutes, the electric eel and the bonefish had tried 6 or 7 methods, but none of them worked. The two of them were somewhat desperate. The electric eel suddenly remembered something, and immediately became somewhat frightened and coward. We seem to have forgotten something. 20 years ago, that God-Emperor of the foreign race, after the bonefish heard this, it also instantly recalled that matter, and trembled in fear. The two of them could not help but distance themselves from the rock wall, and did not dare to casually try to attack again. You mean, that God-Emperor of the foreign race has not left, and he is here in seclusion to recover from his injuries? It should be possible, or there would not be such a huge commotion. Moreover, only a God-Emperor could release such a powerful force to prevent us from investigating. But, it has been 20 years, his injuries should have healed long ago, right? I'm just saying that he could still be here. No one knows what is hidden inside the rock wall. Just as the electric eel and the bonefish were discussing in private, many figures flew over from all directions. At least a few hundred sea beasts of different appearances rushed over from all directions, rushing towards the trench. Clearly, the alarmed sea beasts in the surroundings were quickly gathering. Chapter 46-56. Hundreds of sea beasts rushed into the trench excitedly, and the first ones they found were the electric eel and the bony fish. Many sea beasts confirmed that the trench in front of them was the source, so they surrounded the electric eel and the bony fish and asked them about the situation. There were too many sea beasts, and they surrounded the electric eel and the bony fish, blocking the trench completely. The voices filled the brains of the electric eel and the bony fish, making them confused and unable to answer. They had no choice but to say that they didn't know anything and that they didn't find anything. As they spoke, they squeezed their way out, passing through the sea beasts with difficulty and escaping the dark trench. Those sea beasts had finally found this place, so of course, they wouldn't leave, and they wouldn't ask the electric eel and the bony fish. They would rather search in the trench, hoping to find some clues and find the hiding place of the heaven and earth treasure. After the electric eel and the bony fish left, more and more sea beasts came from all directions and gathered near the trench. At least 3,000 sea beasts entered the trench and started a carpet search, swearing to find the reason for the gathering of the divine light. Other than the electric eel and the bony fish, no sea beasts knew about the god emperor of the other tribes. All the sea beasts thought that this trench could swallow a huge amount of divine power and form a sun at the bottom of the sea, and that some rare treasure was about to appear. Most of the sea beasts were at the divine lord realm, and the remaining few were at the godly king realm. They also wanted to obtain the heaven and earth treasure to quickly increase their strength and reach a higher level. However, thousands of sea beasts searched the entire trench, but they didn't find the heaven and earth treasure, and they couldn't find the reason. Only a few dozen sea beasts found a certain rock wall, which seemed to be covered by a mysterious power, and they couldn't explore it. Some of the bolder sea beasts tried to attack the rock wall, trying to break open the rock wall to see what was hidden inside. However, the various divine spells they cast were like clay oxen entering the sea when they landed on the rock wall. There was no effect at all. Even the divine power of heaven and earth within a radius of hundreds of thousands of kilometers, which had been condensed into all-encompassing multicolored divine light, would be devoured by that rock face. It wasn't hard to imagine that the divine powers used by the divine lord realm and godly king realm sea beasts were also swallowed. Such a unique scene attracted even more sea beasts, and they all tried to break through the stone wall. As the news spread, more and more sea beasts came to know that the source of the problem was in that cliff. However, the thousands of sea beasts took turns to attack and pry into the cliff, but they were all helpless. None of them could see the secret behind it. 2 days later, more than 10,000 sea beasts gathered near the dark trench. At least half of the sea beasts had tried to explore the cliff either alone or in groups. The end result was the same. Nothing. After those sea beasts failed in their attempts, they became more and more certain that there was an emperor-level divine object or treasure hidden in the rock wall. However, they wouldn't waste any more of their efforts. They all retreated and watched the other sea beasts attack from the side. As for the electric eel and bony fish, they had been staying above the trench, silently observing the situation. In any case, after this incident, they could no longer stay in their nests and territories. There were sea beasts everywhere. Other than watching the show, they could only absorb some of the 5-colored divine light to quickly increase their strength. Unknowingly, 5 days had passed. At this time, the number of sea beasts gathered around the trench had reached 30,000. All the sea beasts that had reached the godly king realm had attacked that cliff. There were even more than 20 godly king realm sea beasts that had joined forces to attack it. However, all of their efforts were in vain. That cliff was safe and sound, and the 5-colored divine light in the surrounding tens of thousands of miles was as dazzling as ever. On the other hand, the sea beasts found that their strength was increasing after staying around the trench for a few days. It was much faster than their cultivation speed by several times. This discovery made the tens of thousands of sea beasts happy. They were even more determined to stay around the trench and refuse to leave. Most of the sea beasts had the same idea. Even if they couldn't find the secret in the cliff, they wouldn't be able to obtain the rare treasure. As long as they stayed near the trench and bathed in the 5-colored divine light, they would be able to increase their strength quickly. In short, it was a win-win situation. However, as more and more sea beasts gathered, the news spread in all directions. More sea beasts found out that the 5-colored divine light's final destination was in that trench. Bathed in the 5-colored divine light, their strength could increase rapidly. Therefore, at least 100,000 sea beasts were tempted. They all rushed to the center of the Black Rock region and headed to that trench. 10 days later, the number of sea beasts gathered around the trench had reached 80,000. More sea beasts were still on their way. The news spread throughout the entire Black Rock region. At least 1 million sea beasts knew that a rare treasure and an emperor-level divine object had appeared in the center of the Black Rock region. All the sea beasts that received the news would think of the incident that had happened 20 years ago. At that time, the two lords, Xian Bing and Zi Dian, didn't give any explanation. They forcefully ordered all their people to vacate the center region and stay at the edge of the region for 5 years. The million sea beasts couldn't help but think that the appearance of the divine object was most likely related to that incident. The electric eel and the bonefish were completely helpless. There were sea beasts everywhere under the 5-colored divine light. Especially near the trench, there were sea beasts everywhere. Even their nests and cultivation grounds were occupied. It couldn't be helped. The sea beasts that occupied their nests had the strength of an upper divine king. The two of them couldn't afford to offend them. The 80,000 sea beasts were all in a lazy posture. Bathed in the 5-colored divine light, they were cultivating and increasing their strength. They were very satisfied and comfortable. Moreover, as time passed, more sea beasts would rush over. As for how long the 5-colored divine light would last, no one could be sure. As the two sea beasts that knew the inside story, the electric eel and the bonefish started to worry about a problem. With so many sea beasts gathered here, something would happen sooner or later. If there was a treasure hidden in the trench, tens of thousands of sea beasts would definitely fight for it when it appeared in the future. It would definitely lead to a massacre. If there wasn't a treasure hidden in the trench, but the god emperor of the other tribe. In the future, if the god emperor of the other tribe was angered, he might start a massacre. Tens of thousands of sea beasts would suffer. In short, it was definitely not a good thing for so many sea beasts to gather here. After a few days of hesitation and consideration, the electric eel and the bonefish finally decided to send a message to report the situation to the two lords and ask them to make a decision. After sending the message, the electric eel and the bonefish stayed near the trench and waited patiently. However, what they didn't expect was that the 5-colored divine light that had lasted for 12 days would gradually dissipate on the second day. The divine power that had gathered from all directions rapidly weakened. The 5-colored divine light within tens of thousands of miles was also swallowed by the rock wall. Previously, the trench was as bright as day. Now, it was dark and cold again. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.